For 10 long years, he endured relentless hardship. She too wondered aloud what path he would choose when she and the others were no longer by his side. The following morning, he made his way downstairs and sat at the table for breakfast. His mother inquired if he'd managed to find a job yet, gently reminding him that his father couldn't keep working forever. Hearing this, he grew irritated and shot back, saying she was getting on his nerves. She parried, noting his repetition. "I understand. I can handle it," though he hadn't changed. Irritated, he left the room but paused at the door, conscience stirring as memories of post-high school trials flashed before him. Even before graduation, he tirelessly searched for a decent job, but every opportunity slipped through his fingers. This completely shattered his self-confidence and left him utterly devoid of motivation. You started receiving messages from friends who had already landed jobs. They showed interest in his affairs, but the boy, disheartened, left their questions hanging in the air, offering no response. As he went upstairs, his mother mentioned their neighbor, noting he had a good job and a young child. Suddenly the doorbell rang. A courier had arrived with a package. The young man froze at the door, surprised by a package. His curious mother asked if he'd ordered it, but he explained it was likely a raffle prize. He often entered contests to ease jobless guilt, sometimes winning risque items. They now openly and unabashedly examined him, a boldness they had never dared show before. The small package surprised his mother, who briefly wondered if it was food before losing interest and leaving. He took it to his room, unwrapped it, and found a note and a disc labeled Village of Fate, sparking his curiosity. He read the note saying he'd been chosen to test a game with advanced AI and the world's first realistic thinking characters. Though he doubted these bold claims, curiosity drove him to keep exploring the game's description and rules. One condition required him to promise that he would never leak any details about the game online. It struck him as odd that there was no official contract to sign, just a promise, presented with the air of a mere formality. Curious, he searched for Village of Fate online but found nothing, making him suspect a virus. To be safe, he tested it on his old PC. If it was just a prank, he'd at least get a funny story for Reddit. As soon as he slid the disc into place, the game's title flashed instantly across the screen. He pressed enter, and at that very moment, the first scene flickered to life on the screen. He was utterly amazed by the breathtaking clarity and intricacy of the graphics, each detail rendered with stunning precision. It surpassed anything he had ever laid eyes on. Nothing he'd witnessed before could compare. Suddenly, he spotted a carriage rolling by with several villagers seated inside, their faces curious as they glanced out at the world beyond their windows. Suddenly, terrifying monsters descend upon the unsuspecting townspeople, throwing the entire city into chaos. A troubling thought crossed his mind. Had the villagers become the predator's next victims? Clutching the sacred book to her chest, the girl whispered over and over, "God of Fate." It seemed as though she were praying for deliverance. You watched the scene unfold with tense anticipation, certain that the monsters would pounce on the horse at any moment. Suddenly, the coachman sprang forward, fiercely determined to defend his carriage. Suddenly, a brilliant light burst forth from the sacred book, illuminating everything around it. In the blink of an eye, everything was engulfed in a dazzling, blinding light. Still reeling from their recent ordeal, the villagers suddenly found themselves deep within the forest. Relief washed over them, and their spirits lifted. They eagerly began to chatter amongst themselves, voices bright with newfound hope. In that moment, he realized this was likely where the true game would begin. As he hovered his cursor over each character, their life stories unfolded before him, revealing intricate biographies with every click. The coachman turned out to be a 26-year-old swordsman named Gems. The girl clutching the prayer book was his younger sister, Chem, a 19-year-old priestess devoted to the faith of God. He noticed how strikingly different the characters were, wondering if the game was developed in Japan. With such polished graphics, it must have been costly and sensational online, yet, oddly, there was little buzz. He decided to revisit this matter later, as he was far more intrigued by the prospect of exploring the descriptions of the other characters. After reviewing the other 3 profiles, he realized they were all family, deepening the mystery. Seeking instructions, he noted the game's text-only dialogue. Meanwhile, Gams apologized for only helping the others escape during the attack. Carol, the youngest sister, excitedly asked about the brilliant flash as Kem clarified that Gems was her older brother. A boy noticed Gems's charm and lively sisters, suspecting he was the true hero. Gems then gently scolded Kem, making Carol giggle. The boy was captivated by the game, especially the vivid characters. Layla, Rhodas, and the other heroes were fascinated by a mysterious glow, which Cham explained came from the Bible she held tightly in her hands. The young man was tasked with writing a prophecy each morning for the villagers, becoming the god of their complex game and embracing the heavy duty of leading them toward prosperity and success. After reading the instructions, he was astonished. At first, he couldn't fully grasp their meaning. He had assumed the game would only recognize isolated words or simple phrases, so he tried entering a short sentence. He reflected that if artificial intelligence could grasp even a fraction of this, the result would be a truly astonishing game. The moment he finished typing the prophecy and pressed enter, the Bible blazed with a sudden burst of light. Hem opened the book and began to read aloud, her voice ringing out as she proclaimed to all that they had received a prophecy from the very god of fate. Excited murmurs rippled through the crowd, accompanied by impatient snorts. Since only Jem could read, everyone eagerly turned to her, urging her to reveal the prophetic words aloud. With solemn gravity, she recited the prophetic verses, commands woven within them to fell the ancient forest and carve out a haven of safety. The words struck the boy to his core, leaving him utterly stunned. Lost in contemplation, he leaned back in his chair, letting his thoughts consume him. He never imagined everything would unfold so flawlessly. Watching the characters slowly realize and respond to the words he'd written, he left him an entire labyrinth, astonished that such incredible technology could even exist. He mused inwardly, if these beings could comprehend and respond with such grasp. This game was astounding. He briefly thought the characters followed scripts, but realized they were really discussing gathering wood and where to spend the night. Rhoda suggested chopping trees in the forest, but then... However, we can't immediately use the wood for construction because... After the wood was cut, Cham was surprised it needed drying, something she and the boy hadn't considered. Rhodas explained the process, and Cham, embarrassed, admitted she'd never explored the topic before. Realizing he knew little, the young man stayed quiet. Sensing uncertainty, Rhodes reassured everyone, saying God's plan allowed tree cutting. Comforted, they gathered their tools and went into the forest to work. The young man noticed that while Gams and Rhodas were busy chopping down trees, the girls were wandering through the forest in search of edible plants. He soon found he could zoom with the mouse wheel, and zooming out revealed a long road, likely where they'd fled by wagon. This sparked curiosity about how to progress and made him briefly wonder if events were happening in real time. He stared in disbelief at what he saw, silently refusing to accept that such a game could truly exist. Suddenly, an explanation about fate points appeared on the screen. These points were awarded based on how deeply the villagers felt gratitude toward the god of fortune, who, as fate would have it, was none other than him. He noticed he currently had 97 points, and these points could be spent on miracles. The more villagers in the settlement and the happier they were, the more faith points he would receive and accumulate. Among these tasks were reuniting fleeing souls with their families and arranging for a traveling merchant or healer to pay a visit to a remote village. He realized he could influence people's fates, but not control their actions, yet he commanded the elements with near divine power. Unsure how to use his limited points, he watched and listened as Rhodas eagerly tried communicating with Gams. Gams remained silent, showing little enthusiasm. Curious about what the girls were discussing, he switched the screen to their conversation and saw them animatedly chatting about food. He considered inviting a traveling merchant to replenish supplies, since villagers had only 2 weeks' food. Hesitant to send Gams out, he tasked Carol with exploration. Later, Lila saved Carol from picking a poisonous mushroom. Worried he couldn't protect the villagers and lacking enough points to summon a helpful familiar, he hoped for another miracle. Hanging his head in defeat after another disappointing game, he suddenly noticed an unexpected path to fatal points: the payment system. He realized he could rack up 10 fatal points just by spending 1,000 yen, and the thought infuriated him. Wasting money didn't make him any richer. He considered selling his books, video games, and even unopened prizes online, hoping to earn some extra cash. After mulling it over, he shifted his attention back to the game and immediately noticed that, as the clock struck 9 in the evening, the villagers were already preparing to turn in for the night. Rhodas saw Gams awake and asked why. Gams said he was keeping watch for monsters. Rhodas assured him divine protection kept them safe. The boy knew the villagers trusted him, but he secretly doubted his own divine power. Yet he feared that confessing such a truth might shatter their faith in him and tarnish the gratitude they felt towards him. He found himself watching how wood was crafted in the game, suddenly pondering how long it had been since he last paid attention to such simple details in real life. Lately, he had been spending nearly all of his free time lost in streams of entertaining videos or endlessly scrolling through the latest posts on Funny Boss on Reddit. He paused, lost in thought. Perhaps if he weren't so meticulous, life in the village might be simpler and cozier for everyone. Suddenly, he sat up, struck by the realization that this game had made him dwell regretfully on his past. Aren't games meant to be fun? They shouldn't leave you feeling miserable. As he sat down once more, a sudden, sharp pain stabbed through the scar on his abdomen. The pain instantly dragged him back to bitter memories. He recalled the moment his younger sister had been in danger and how powerless he had been to protect her. He plunged into a street brawl, squaring off against a boy right there on the sidewalk. That guy drove his knife deep into him. Yet in that very moment, he left something behind. In Renford, he had left behind something truly important, something that still weighed heavily on his heart. It was from that very moment that everything truly began. With a trace of melancholy in his eyes, he rose from his chair, longing for nothing more than to lose himself in the world of games, if only for a while. The next morning, as he slowly opened his eyes, he realized that dawn had already broken outside. He recalled how just last night he'd been digging through information on woodworking techniques, and then, without even realizing it, he drifted off to sleep right at the table. He glanced at the clock. It was 7 in the morning. He couldn't remember the last time he'd woken up this early. As he approached his computer, he noticed that everyone in the game was already up and bustling with activity. Suddenly, it dawned on him that the villagers truly existed here and now, living their lives in real time. As he considered which prophecy to share next, a loud stomach rumble reminded him he'd barely eaten last night, too absorbed in the game. Surrounded by empty wrappers, he sighed and headed to the kitchen, hoping for anything to eat. As he neared the kitchen, he heard his family at breakfast. Since the unpleasant incident with his younger sister, he and his father had fiercely argued over his job search and hadn't spoken directly since. For a fleeting moment, he was tempted to step inside, greet them with a warm smile, and ask if he might join them for breakfast. The notion struck him as utterly absurd. Around the table, everyone ate breakfast in quick, focused bites, anxious to gather their strength for the demanding day that awaited them. With no job and nothing to show for himself, he couldn't bear to meet their gaze. So he turned away, retreated to his room, and threw himself into muscle-strengthening exercises. Recalling his past escape and lingering weakness he needed to overcome, he continued training and stole a quick glance at the computer screen out of the corner of his eye. He watched Carol join in with the others, her laughter mingling with theirs. Even though it was just a game, Everyone seemed so much happier than he did. Suddenly, he realized that even within the virtual world, their lives seemed richer and more vibrant than his own. Weighed down by guilt, he resolved to caution them, not to place their hopes in a clumsy god like himself. Therefore, he penned a prophecy for this very day. The journey presses on. They received the prophecy, and villagers gathered around her in anticipation. As she read aloud, a heavy silence fell. The boy's heart pounded with anxiety, fearing the people might lose faith in her god. It seemed as though the young man was simply making excuses. Regret already weighed on him for having delivered their message. Yet, just then, Sham broke the silence. Raudus suggested their god may have lost power in the demon wars. Inspired, the people's faith rose to 110. Yet though encouraged, Raudus lamented the slow pace. He knew real change for them would still take a long time. He overheard them complain about sleepless nights on the wagon, missing comfort and security from monsters. Listening to their worries, he wished for more faith points, but couldn't spare even the few precious ones he had. The only way to earn more faith points was by using the in-game payment system. He'd already listed his unopened items for sale, hoping they would fetch him somewhere between 20 and 30,000 yen. He glanced over at his stack of books, deep in thought. Maybe he should take them to the shop and trade them in for some cash. But then a dilemma surfaced. He hadn't stepped outside for months, the world beyond his door slowly fading into a distant memory. However, he knew all too well that unless he made these sacrifices, the villagers would suffer a crushing defeat, and his own chance to return to the game would vanish forever. After careful consideration, he decided to step outside. Donning his finest clothes, he noticed with a touch of surprise how perfectly they fit him, despite not having gained a single ounce. As a child, he firmly believed that by the time he reached 30, adulthood would naturally bestow upon him both grace and wisdom. He promised himself he'd pick up the game again tomorrow. But just as he was about to leave, something inside him suddenly trembled. Caroline became so utterly absorbed in the game that she lost herself completely in her own inner world. Watching her persist, despite her injury, filled him with a heavy sadness. Even wounded, she refused to give up the fight. She gathered up her wooden sticks and pressed onward without pause. Moreover, you'll notice that every player in this strange game appeared. Weariness settled over her as she realized just how utterly exhausting the day had been. For them, this day proved even more challenging than usual, testing their strength and resolve like never before. Brimming with determination, he grabbed his book bag and made a silent vow. Today, he would give it everything he had. As he approached the door, his mother looked at him with surprise and asked if he was planning to go out, her curiosity evident as she inquired what had happened. He replied briefly, promising a quick return, then rode off on his bicycle as curious passers-by watched. Meanwhile, his thoughts lingered on those he had left behind in his room. He hurried to the bookstore and eagerly searched the shelves for a book on ruling villagers. He spotted one about distant worlds but realized it wouldn't help with the challenges he faced in his current game. Besides, he simply couldn't afford to buy anything new. After selling his old books, he stepped out onto the street and spotted the familiar bakery he used to visit so often. I once visited this place with my family. He decided to step inside and take a closer look at the desserts. He bought 4 servings of pudding and set off for home, anticipation bubbling within him. When he handed the puddings to his mother, a warm smile spread across her face as she asked if they were meant for her. The boy quickly replied that he had brought treats for everyone, then hurried on his way. The boy hurried back to his room, a trace of embarrassment coloring his cheeks. Inside, he chastised himself. There was no need to swell with pride over a single modest act of kindness. He paused, lost in thought. What was he doing with his life at this age anyway? After spending a staggering $20,000, he finally managed to collect all 300 tenafate points. He watched as the villagers prepared their evening meal, gathering around the table in warm camaraderie. He pondered what miracle to perform next. The ability to review the villagers' past conversations was at his fingertips, yet the thought unsettled him. It felt too much like eavesdropping, and the notion filled him with unease. Despite his doubts, he tried the new feature and heard villagers chatting cheerfully, with Layla teasing about a river swim and not minding who saw. But her mood shifted as she recalled the panic from a monster attack on their stone village. His curiosity piqued. He set out to learn more and was astonished to discover an abundance of information about this place. Once nearly 100 villagers called this place home. After the monster's attack, the townspeople scattered in panic, fleeing for their lives. Horse-drawn wagons rattled through the streets, carrying those desperate to escape the chaos. They were traveling now in wagons exactly like these, the very same kind that once rumbled along these ancient roads. It was at that moment he grasped the true purpose of the miracle. It was meant to reunite the villagers once more. This miracle was meant to reunite all the villagers who had fled and scattered far and wide. Lost in daydreams of their joyful homecoming, he was suddenly brought back to reality by his mother's voice. She was calling him in for dinner. He stepped into the dining room and found his father already seated at the table. Seeing him home early was rare. Ever since he'd become a hikikomori, they met only a few times monthly. His father barely responded, asking if diligent Sayuki was working late. Their mother offered tsukemono from Okiku, her elderly neighbor. When he was a boy, she would often spoil them with handfuls of sweets. He realized that the only reason he hadn't been cast out of the house, despite their dire financial straits, was because his father labored tirelessly, providing the family with a steady and reliable income. After dinner, he thanked his parents and left the table. His mother offered dessert, noting their son bought it, and his unenthusiastic father agreed. Disappointed, the boy played his game, where Gams reminded him of his reliable father. Kem knew healing magic, but her spells suited battle, so she and the villagers relied on the Gams for cures. Summoning help cost too many points, and conjuring a random person was risky. As he paused, an attack alert flashed on screen. Suddenly, everyone was jolted awake by an urgent alert. With a trembling voice, Kem anxiously asked what was happening. Gams informed them that monsters were attacking and sternly warned everyone not to leave the wagon under any circumstances. Rodas told his wife and daughter to stay inside the wagon due to nearby danger. Gamma calmly promised to handle it and asked Kem to be ready in case her healing magic was needed, which reassured everyone. Yoshio was gripped by intense tension. Darkness pressed in from every side, rendering him blind to any lurking monsters. He had no idea where they might be hiding, and the uncertainty gnawed at him. Suddenly, out of the swirling mist, 2 stray dogs emerged. "Yoshi, your new legs have proven to be remarkably sturdy." His anxiety worsened as he faced not one, but 2 foes. Desperately hoping for a miracle, he hesitated, yet before he could react, the monsters lunged at Gams with terrifying speed. Gams swung his sword with wild fury, cutting through both monsters in a single devastating blow. After the battle, utterly spent, Gams sank onto a fallen log, seeking a moment's respite from his exhaustion. His sister, beaming with relief, rushed over to him and asked if he was all right. But then, quite suddenly, Gams collapsed to the ground unconscious. Everyone froze in stunned silence. Yoshio cried out Gams's name, realizing it was a flawless victory. His sister burst into tears and flung her arms around him, overcome with emotion. She was on the verge of hysteria. She screamed in panic, realizing Gem's body was already turning cold. Just outside the scene, Yoshio tried to process the chaos. Rodas checked Gem's pulse and saw bite marks, realizing venom was spreading. He asked Kem about antidote magic, but she admitted she hadn't mastered the spell, crushing their hopes. In desperation, Rodas asked if they had any antidotes left in their supplies, but Gem just shook his head. There was nothing. Paralyzed by shock, Carol stood frozen, unable to believe what was happening. With tears streaming down her face, Sem desperately begged her brother not to leave her, crying out to God for a miracle to save him and vowing to do anything to keep her beloved elder brother alive. Yoshio froze in panic, fearing Gamza's death would nullify all their efforts. Remembering his power as God here, he found the rare, wandering healer for 300 fatal points, debating the risk. His mother's shout jolted him from despair. Realizing just how loudly he'd been shouting, the boy hesitated. Even if the doctor did come in the dead of night, the villagers might find it suspicious. Without hesitating for long, Yoshio ultimately decided to seize the miracle before him. Suddenly, a traveling doctor appeared at my side. Overwhelmed by shock and indignation, Kem abruptly demanded to know who he was. Unfazed, the doctor calmed them with a reassuring tone, introducing himself as a traveling healer. Yoshihiko smiled softly, fully aware that their suspicion was only natural. To dispel their lingering doubts, he unveiled the prophecy and added, "Astonished by the prophecy that echoed through the night's stillness, everyone offers heartfelt gratitude to God." Then, the doctor turns and asks a question. "I'll examine Gamma while the rest of you can observe. Thank you all for your cooperation." The doctor then treated Gamma's wound with the newly acquired medicine, his hands moving with practiced precision. Gradually, a sense of relief began to wash over Gamma. The pain eased, Gamma's fever broke, and color returned to his face. Relaxed now, Yoshio wondered about the doctor's gender. As Rhodus read the prophecy aloud, Yoshio recalled bringing the doctor and reminded everyone that, though their trials continued, the gods always watched over them. Yoshio saw hope in the villagers' faces after speaking, while the next day, the girls gathered food and Rhodus devoted himself to training. While Rhodus honed his sword skills to protect others, a sudden rustling in the bushes drew his attention. A rabbit darted out, startling him so much he lost his composure and fell to the ground in fright. Meanwhile, the doctor meticulously prepared a blend of healing herbs, determined to cure Gamza. Kem asked what brought the doctor to such a remote place. He explained that medicine was his family legacy, and he sought rare herbs in the dangerous forbidden forest. Seeing a strange light, he was drawn closer. Kem called it fate. The doctor, agnostic, chuckled that perhaps it was fate or a sign, despite not believing in God. When Kem asked if he'd leave, the doctor vowed never to abandon a patient and asked to stay longer. Kem warmly agreed. She warned him that at the moment they didn't have a single decent hiding place. Then, with a searching glance, she asked if that thought unsettled him at all. A smile lit up his face when he realized the doctor would stay, but concern followed. With the doctor in the wagon, someone had to sleep outside, and Gamsa, though rescued, still needed several days to recover fully. At that moment, Sheo began to ponder the need for a safe haven where they could live in peace. He resolved to carefully consider the wisest way to spend his fate points, determined not to waste this precious opportunity. The doctor recalled a nearby cave from an old mine and assured them it would shelter them from wind and rain, possibly with leftover tools. Yoshio was relieved, and Rhodus eagerly asked the doctor to lead them there. "It's just a 5-minute walk." At last they arrived at the cave and found themselves standing before an enormous, imposing set of doors. The doctor surmised that these doors likely served as a passageway for transporting cargo, given their appearance as the building's main entrance. Yoshi immediately suspected that this place must have once been part of a mining area. The moment they pushed open the door, someone was already there to greet them. Before them stretched a vast, breathtaking expanse. Everyone was filled with excitement. Yoshio, too, couldn't hide his astonishment. The space before him was far more expansive than he had ever imagined. Although the rooms were somewhat cluttered, there were far more of them than expected. Yoshio noticed that everyone had become so engrossed in exploring their new home, they had completely forgotten about the doctor. Shemet gently placed Gams on the bed, holding his hand reassuringly. He softly told him they'd arrived safely. Nearby, spring water flowed, and a spot for cooking meals had already been prepared. The girls rolled up their sleeves, ready to bring order to this place. Yoshio felt a deep, heartfelt gratitude toward the doctor who had given them shelter in their time of need. While the physician tended carefully to Gams's injuries, Hem quietly asked everyone to lower their voices and clean up to surprise Gams when he woke. Carol claimed Gams's room and teased she'd share his bed, making Hem jealous. Yoshi, hungry but excited about the new village, left to find food. Suddenly, he noticed his sister Sayuki stepping out of her room as well. He turned to Sayuki with a curious glimmer in his eye, asking if she, too, was taking a break from her usual routine. She replied curtly that she was heading downstairs to get something to eat, and snapped at him to move out of her way. He mentioned that he was going down as well, but Sayuki sharply warned him not to use the first-floor bathroom. Hearing this, his anger flared hotter than ever, but from that moment on, she never treated him the same way again. He said nothing in response. Instead, he simply promised that he would no longer use the bathroom. After finishing his meal, he returned to his room, lost in contemplation of his sister. He remembered how inseparable they once were, strolling side by side, sharing laughter and unwinding together at every opportunity. He wondered, would their bond have survived if things had turned out differently back then? A dull ache twisted in his stomach as he faced the painful truth. No matter how deep his regrets or vivid his memories, the past could not be changed. He decided to pay the villagers a visit and noticed that they had meticulously tidied up the entire area. Rhodas asked Layla where Kem had gone, and she replied that he had gone to visit Gams. Carol admitted that she, too, wanted to drop by, but Rhodas gently advised her to let them have some peace for now. With a warm smile, he invited her to stay by her father's side and join them on the upcoming cave expedition. She agreed to show her brother their world once he recovered. Kem entered, offered to help, and the doctor, accepting, stressed he should rest, noting his symptoms were improving, but to report any changes. Kem reassured her brother. Yoshio's eyes lit up with relief as he noticed Gams's condition steadily improving. Suddenly, above Gams, a mysterious box materialized, filled with the very dreams he had only glimpsed in his sleep. You tapped the screen, and in an instant, its display transformed before your eyes. Suddenly, everything around Yoshio shifted, and before him stood a younger version of Gams. The young Gams found himself surrounded by his entire circle of friends, all coaxing him to join them for a drink. Yet, with a polite smile, he declined, admitting that times were tough for him at the moment. Gams rushed home, aware his sister awaited him. Finding his father drunk, he took payment for watching Kem, only to discover her weak from days without food. Furious, he rescued her, warning his father to stay out of their way if he valued his safety. Gams stepped out with Kem following, who nervously asked their destination. He replied, "Anywhere but home." Kem warned their father would be furious, but Gams calmly assured her they'd never see him again and not to be afraid. Suddenly, he felt silent tears begin to roll gently down his cheeks. He was startled to realize he was crying. A slight smile crossed his lips as he wondered if his pain was from his own faults, admitting he wanted to change. Through the window, he saw his father and sister slowly walking away together. As they left the house, she asked her father if he wore the tie she'd gifted him. He smiled and wondered if it looked odd, but his daughter beamed and assured him it suited him perfectly. After watching them leave, he walked over to the computer and caught sight of Lei and Carol busily preparing dishes together. While the doctor and Gams were on duty, he took a moment to survey their home with quiet satisfaction. Already, everyone had managed to set up the essential equipment and furniture, transforming the space into a comfortable, inviting haven. Only 3 days had passed since they had settled into the cave, yet their daily lives had already improved remarkably. He believed this miracle was truly worth using. Meanwhile, Gams found himself face to face with a colossal wild boar. Gams nimbly dodged the attack, weaving out of harm's way with agile precision. The board crashed into him with a loud bang, knocking him off balance. The archer who had let the arrow fly turned out to be none other than Dr. Malice himself. Approaching Gams, he warned him not to overexert himself, reminding him gently that his wounds had not yet fully healed. Yoshio looked up the doctor's name, but aside from the name itself, Mollis, he found nothing. Mollis was not only a master of potions, but also a legendary archer, a combination that made him the perfect companion for Gams. Moreover, Mollis possessed the mystical ability to control plants, making him the only one capable of guiding them safely to the entrance of the cave. Yoshio hoped Mollis would settle in the village, but the doctor's profile was just classified. Realizing this world was more complex than expected, he returned with the group to their cave, warmly welcomed by Chie-em and Carol. Gamzin and Mollis passed the wooden board along, and after Layla exchanged greetings with the Tanid next to her, she couldn't hide her delight upon discovering that meat would be served for dinner. She warned supplies of spices and salt, vital for cooking and preserving meat, were running low. Yoshio, unsettled, realized they needed a reliable food source and considered using the notification to buy seeds and provisions. He was captivated by a golem, giant stone beings he could control with a special device. The concept thrilled him, but summoning one cost 700 fate points, equivalent to a hefty 70,000 yen in real money. Yoshio Zanet, with only 160 points, and villagers bringing him just 10 points daily, would need 2 or 3 more months to reach the required amount, especially since he had already spent all his savings on the game. Watching the villagers relish their evening meal, Yoshio felt a wave of relief wash over him. Rising from his chair, he headed over to brew himself a cup of coffee. Yoshio, feeling both content and uneasy, made coffee and observed the farmers. He noticed the chief and Gams busy with a project. As Kem announced its completion and asked about respect, they finally unveiled what they had built together. Before them stood a statue. Gam reassured Chim that their feelings mattered most, convinced God heard their thoughts and watched over them. Mollis, curious, asked if the figure was a statue of God, and Chim confirmed with a nod. Chim explained that despite the statue's crude form, people needed a sacred place to pray and give gifts. Yoshio noted it was made for him, yet its ambiguous form led him to question the god's gender. Suddenly, Chim's fruit offering vanished instantly. You will come to realize that, in their world, God was not just a belief, but a living, undeniable reality. The disappearance of the sacrificial offering came as no great surprise. After the sacrifice, Yoshi saw his destiny points rise and learned that offerings boosted them. To avoid pressuring villagers, he subtly hinted they could gift him unwanted items instead of making direct demands. Yoshi subtly suggested villagers bring him unwanted items, claiming he could turn them, and their thoughts, into miracles. Their obvious joy worried him. Such innocence in modern Japan made them vulnerable to frauds and cults. At that moment, he realized they might unknowingly be part of something similar. The next day, Yoshio saw Gams and Rodas joyfully offering a massive coffin to their god, amazed by their willingness to sacrifice something so grand. As villagers prayed and gave gifts, he realized noon had passed, lost in the game's excitement. Suddenly, his mother called from downstairs to tell him a package had arrived. Descending the stairs, he quickly noticed that the parcel had arrived from the village of Vera. Thinking the package had forgotten reference materials, he grumbled. His curious mother tore it open before he could stop her. Yoshio objected, but both were surprised to find it contained strange, exotic fruits they'd never seen. They resembled teddy bears, but their bright red color was like ripe apples. Yoshio was stunned. These were the same fruits given by the villagers. Thinking they were an exotic treat, his mother suggested having them for dessert that night. A subtle citrus scent rose from the fruit, completely natural. Recalling locals enjoying them, he tried one. To his surprise, it was the tastiest fruit he'd ever had, perhaps a clever game detail, or just an ordinary exotic fruit. Still, he had no complaints. After all, he was fortunate enough to savor such a delicious treat. After eating, he returned to his computer and wrote a prophecy thanking the villagers for the fruit, assuring them food wasn't required. only if they had some to spare. He reminded them that, above all, they must first tend to their own needs. Smiling, he dreamed of helping others once he earned enough points for a golem, but his mother's irritated voice from downstairs quickly reminded him her patience was running out. He hurriedly descended the stairs, only to spot a wooden log lying right across the threshold. It was the emblem of Fife Village, intricately carved into wood, a symbol of the community's proud identity. His mother asked what he planned to do with the log, but he stood rooted to the spot, speechless. This was the very same wooden log the villagers had brought him just yesterday. Inwardly, the boy realized they'd taken the joke far too far. He tried to lift the log, but immediately realized just how heavy it was. His mother asked why he needed it, and the boy replied that he wanted to carry the log into the garden. Pretending his mother wanted him to exercise, he marveled at how grueling Gam's and Rodas's work was. He even considered complaining to the game's creators, but found no contacts, just a return address in distant Hokkaido, which baffled him further. He searched the internet for the company but found nothing. No site, reviews, or mentions. The address led only to an unremarkable building, fueling doubts it was just a front, yet he couldn't afford or dare to visit, so he remained uncertain. The villagers greeted them with a frosty indifference, their gazes chilly and their words few, as if an invisible wall stood between the outsiders and the tightly knit community. He came home with fresh monster meat from a beast he'd slain, shocking both him and his mother. She doubted him at first, but after he explained his plan to revive the village, she praised him, leaving him even more amazed. He handed her a slab of wild boar, suggesting she cook it. She stared in disbelief, unsure how to prepare it. From then on, daily parcels from Faith arrived for him, each filled with fruits, monster meat, and more. Alongside this, crystals, once mere sources of light within the game, began to shimmer with a new significance. Moreover, as he journeyed onward, he kept stumbling upon more and more hidden treasures along his path. He pondered whether it was possible to buy such items somewhere, yet he already had his own theory to explain this peculiar phenomenon. Perhaps this game was originally designed for the wealthy, with valuable items sent to players as exclusive gifts. Maybe he'd been picked as a test player by chance. One evening, his mother made a savory meat sauté from a recent gift and asked at dinner if he could bring home more of those fruits, since they were running out. The moment she tasted the fruits, relief washed over her and she felt better. He promised to ask villagers for more. She noted even Sayuki enjoyed the meat, and her father praised its richer, authentic flavor and unique, refined texture. The way his father spoke so passionately about the dish left no doubt in Yoshio's mind. He truly enjoyed it. Such enthusiasm was a rare sight from his father, making it all the more convincing. The next day, Yoshio found himself in the garden, wrestling with a saw as he tried to cut firewood. His father stood nearby, quietly observing his son's struggle with the task. He found it incredibly difficult, every step demanding all his strength. He offered to show the boy the right way to complete the task, guiding him step by step with patient expertise. He suspected that his father offered help only out of fear that the neighbors might notice his struggles, and his son would be consumed by shame. After showing the right technique, his father let him try the saw again and offered more advice. Recently, they planned to fix the fence, and he also wondered how to teach villagers to cook, as sharing meals had become special to him. One evening, as he rummaged through the refrigerator, his sister unexpectedly returned home. She greeted him as usual, but was taken aback when she heard the sound of his voice in reply. Later, alone in his room, he realized how much more connected he felt to his family thanks to Faith Village, and how the villagers weren't just receiving his help, they were helping him grow too. Then he invited us to step inside. Yoshio sensed their defense was stronger, but tension grew. Despite calm fronts, anxiety was clear, especially in glances at the wall calendar, where the last day of the month was marked. Was something important going to happen then? Everyone gathered around the table, sharing dinner in the warm glow of evening. When Carol asked why everyone seemed glum, Rhoda assured her their parents were fine, but admitted the adults hid worries, especially on month's end, when anxiety spiked. Carol wondered why only 7 gods mattered in 12 months, not 12. He smiled, impressed by her keen perception, and explained the 7 gods represented the days of the week: light, moon, fire, water, nature, lightning, earth, which Yoshio linked to Monday through Sunday like in their world. He finally understood the pantheon's workings and his place among the gods serving the 7 supreme deities, witnessing fierce rivalries, cataclysmic war, devastating blizzards, and the rise of nature, water, and lightning gods. Yet, on the 243rd day, the god of fire erupted in a storm of furious rage. After 365 relentless days, the fierce battle between the gods finally drew to a close. After ages of war, one faction of gods won and descended, each guarding a weekday as the 7 supreme gods. The defeated became evil, exiled underground, and each month's last day, the temptation of the evil god, they empower monsters. Layla appeared in Astamol without warning, as if she had stumbled into the city by accident. He confessed to her that he couldn't shake the thoughts of the evil god's temptation. Recalling the very same attack that had happened before, he opened up about his deep fear of losing his family. Noticing Rhoda's trembling violently, Yoshia pondered deeply. What could have happened during the last ordeal with the evil god? Carol lay peacefully asleep in her bed but suddenly jolted awake, startled from her dreams. Carol set out to find her parents and soon discovered them bustling about in the kitchen, busy with their chores. When her mother noticed her, she gently asked Carol to go and look for Grandma. She made her way to the well to wash up. The cool water invigorated her, sending a refreshing wave of energy through her body. She realized she'd forgotten her towel when Kem appeared, asking if Carol just woke up. Nodding, Carol asked about their older brother. Kem said he was guarding the gate. Carol dashed off, yelling she didn't care if he was there. Kame was displeased by what she saw. Spotting Carol as she tried to flee, Kame quickly rushed after her, determined to stop her from escaping. Carol asked Kame if she'd heard a voice. Kame wasn't sure and sat to eat. After breakfast, Carol rushed outside. Her mother called after her, but Carol hurried on, cheerfully greeting everyone in the busy marketplace. When someone asked if Frodeus and Layla were home, Carol answered without breaking her stride and immediately dashed off again. At last, she spotted Gams nearby. Carol dashed over to him and threw her arms around him in a tight embrace. Gams told Carol it wasn't a good day to be outside, noting the empty streets. He explained the wall was built after a past war, and since then, the town and its people had always felt safe, as the fortress had never been breached. Carol's face lit up with joy at the news, but Rodis and Layla exchanged anxious glances. Casting his eyes toward the window, Rodis quietly remarked that, just in case, he had already packed all the essentials into the van. Layla nodded affirmatively and wrote to us, expressing her hope that nothing unusual would happen. She sincerely wished for a peaceful day, free from troubles or unexpected events. The streets swarmed with monsters, far more than usual, and an ever-deepening sense of unease crept through the air. This time a motley array of monsters banded together, forming a single fearsome pack. They all attacked at once. But Gamzin isn't standing alone. He has allies by his side, and together we're mounting a formidable defense. We unleash a relentless storm of spears and arrows upon the monsters. One of Gama's subordinates rallied the group, urging everyone to stick close. With unwavering determination, he insisted they could not, under any circumstances, allow the monsters to breach the city. Suddenly, one of the monsters vaulted over the wall and lunged at a soldier. Everyone froze in shock. Monsters swarmed over the walls, flooding the city in chaos. Inside, Rodis, Lila, and Carol clung together in terror. Suddenly, Gams and his sister burst in, worriedly asking if everyone was safe. They reassured everyone they were fine, though both were bloodied. Gams from fighting, Hem from helping the wounded. As Gams revealed the city's peril, he considered sending his family and sister to safety before it was too late. Gams urged everyone to flee without delay, while Rotus, brimming with determination, announced that the wagon stood ready, already packed with several crates filled with vital supplies. As soon as the wagon began to move, monsters suddenly emerged nearby. Hams wasted no time. He swiftly ordered Rotos to climb back aboard the wagon. Climb aboard the wagon with them, just as it lurches forward at full speed. Gams reported that a section of the city's northwestern wall had collapsed. Perhaps they'll manage to escape through that gap in the wall. Rotus stood stunned, his eyes wide with shock as he gazed upon the city engulfed in flames, chaos and destruction reigning all around him. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he watched, unable to tear his gaze away. Once a thriving, vibrant town, this place has now become nothing more than a landscape of ruins and decay. After their escape from the city, Carol turned to her mother with a trembling voice and asked if they would ever find a safe place to belong. Will they ever find their way home again? Would Mother or Melancholy have gently whispered that such a hope was most likely out of reach? She assured them new adventures awaited in distant lands, smiling warmly as she credited divine protection for their safe journey, and softly added that the god of fate himself now guided their steps. That very day, a courier arrived at Yoshi's doorstep and handed him a small package. Meanwhile, in the present day, Rotus devoted himself tirelessly to honing his combat skills. Games trained Rotus, but urged him not to fight on the front lines, offering to take that risk in malice. Disheartened, Rotus apologized for wasting time. Yoshi noted Games was strict. Later, Layla asked Games to gather fruit on patrol. Carol eagerly volunteered to help, her energy surprising Rotus. Despite his warnings about danger outside as the special day neared, she insisted she'd be safe with her brother. When their father angrily forbade her, Carol ran off in tears. Yoshio watched Rotus in silence, reflecting on his helplessness. He knew all he could offer was a prophecy, not a real solution. With just 214 faith points, he wondered if he should perform a miracle, like summoning hunters. Still, such a move was fraught with risk. There was no telling what kind of people these hunters truly were. Yoshio saw summoning a golem as the best way to protect the villagers, but it cost 700 points, and he had only 10 days left. He considered borrowing money or selling gifts, but both options seemed embarrassing or unrealistic. Yoshio's mind raced with worry as he pondered his next move. Suddenly, a spark of inspiration lit up his thoughts. Perhaps he could make some extra money by picking up a side job. It seemed like the simplest solution, but the trouble was it had never worked before. He recalled his prideful job interviews, seeking only prestige and perks, but ending up jobless everywhere, shaming his family despite his father's help. For 10 years, anxiety over failure kept Yoshio from working, though he sometimes considered it. But now, he no longer wished to let anyone down. He realized it was time for change. Without courage now, he might never change. He wondered if he could get a job with a monthly wage large enough to support the villagers. Finding even a temporary job nearby was tough, and not having a license made it harder. Realizing obstacles were everywhere, Rotus tried to comfort Carol, but she withdrew. Layla quietly advised giving her some space. Watching their struggle, Yoshio was moved and decided not to just observe. He threw on his jacket, biked into the city to buy a job magazine instead of relying solely on the internet, and his mother was delighted by his new initiative. His mother greeted him with delight, praising his new independence. Eager, Yoshio rushed to his room to check job listings, but before he could, his mother called him back for dinner. He descended to the first floor and joined his family at the table, where dinner was already laid out, waiting for them all. Yoshio noticed his sister was already home. Surprised, she asked if she should be there, but he just smiled and greeted her warmly, leaving her flustered as they all gathered for dinner. Their mother suddenly announced that Yoshio was thinking of getting a job. Sayuki gave an awkward smile. Their father joked, "So, you finally found motivation?" and a flustered Yoshio rushed to explain his reasoning. He explained it was just a side job for money, but his father said the reason didn't matter. What mattered was finally taking action. This response caught Yoshio off guard, as he had expected something very different. Yoshio's father insisted he work full-time, rejecting other options. Sayuki teased he'd changed, hinting at a girlfriend. Their mother joked he wasn't a heartthrob, leaving Yoshio puzzled by her eagerness to answer for him. Sayuki called Yoshio Big Brother, warming him. His father then asked if his job search was tied to village life, which Yoshio admitted he wanted to give back. After dinner, Yoshio told his father he was considering 3 jobs to call tomorrow. His father asked if he sought temporary work. Yoshio said yes, explaining he was busy until month's end and could only work briefly. He preferred physical labor over customer service due to lacking confidence with customers. His father suggested seeking help from an old acquaintance, stressing that a parent is always there for their child and there's no shame in family support. Yoshio recalled once refusing his father's help out of stubbornness. That's when his father advised, if you truly want to achieve something, never be ashamed to accept help, even from family. This reminded Yoshio how Rhodas had offered to help Carol, but her partner stubbornly refused. He too was cast aside, just as Yoshio once had been. After considering his father's advice, Yoshio agreed. His father quickly arranged help via an old friend, told him to change and return in 30 minutes, assuring Yoshio a resume wasn't needed yet. Yoshio shaved and changed clothes promptly. Yoshio remained anxious about disappointing his father. Before leaving, he quickly checked the computer to see village updates. Seeing Rhodas troubled, he quietly asked Layla if she needed any help. Layla paused for a moment in thoughtful silence before replying that Carol had already taken care of everything. She explained that ever since they settled in the cave, Carol had taken the lead, always stepping forward and offering her help without hesitation. This moment was a vivid testament to how much she had grown. Afterward, Rhodas approached Carol to apologize for his outburst of anger. Carol smiled, revealing she knew his anger was protective, and she felt valued. Rhodas was struck by her maturity. She vowed not to seek permission to go outside. Admitting fault, Rhodas cited old fears in a land now safe with loyal friends. He realized that they had chosen to build a life together, and with that understanding came a revelation. They could no longer hide or let fear dictate their lives. Rhodos's sudden change surprised everyone as he proudly declared Carol a full village member, free to shape her destiny and with his full trust. The gathering welcomed this warmly, while Yoshio quietly observed from the sidelines. He smiled, letting out a relieved sigh as he lowered his head. Silently thanking the game for granting him the courage to change his life, he walked away, his heart brimming with joy. Watching the joyful faces of his fellow villagers, his heart brimmed with genuine elation. Yoshio soon found himself in his father's car heading to visit his dad's friend. Curious, he asked about the job, and his father explained it was cleaning work at a supermarket that was currently short-staffed. Hearing this, Yoshio paused, wondering if this job was truly the right fit for him. At long last, they arrived at their destination, and a close friend of their father, who had been waiting nearby, greeted them warmly and with genuine delight. He greeted the unusually reserved Yoshio with a warm smile, quietly marveling at how remarkably fit he remained for someone who had spent so much time shut away indoors. Suddenly, unease swept over Yoshio, like a child reluctant to leave his father. Entering the supermarket, his father's friends' reassuring words echoed, "Just relax. There's nothing to worry about." All he had to do was follow instructions carefully and ask him or the other 2 workers if unsure. His father's friend introduced him to them and jokingly told them not to overburden the newcomer on his first day. The girl greeted them warmly, clearly happy to meet someone new. The boy joked that Yoshi's impressive height must be useful, especially for reaching and cleaning those tricky fluorescent lights. He reminded himself that he was still new here. Now was not the time for pride, but for putting in every ounce of effort. With a slight bow of his head, he expressed his hope that they would be able to understand one another well. As Yoshihu's shift ended, the supermarket manager asked if he could work the same overnight shift tomorrow, starting at 8 p.m. Yoshihu agreed confidently, and his co-workers wished him well and said they looked forward to seeing him again. After they left, Yoshio smiled with relief. Walking home, he reflected on the tasks he'd finished, vacuuming every corner and carefully returning each item to its proper place. He hadn't moved with such energy in a long time, and the sensation was unexpectedly exhilarating. As he pushed open the door, he imagined everyone else was already fast asleep. He was dreaming of a relaxing bath, but thirst led him to the kitchen, where he saw a delicious meal with a note. "Great job today. You must be starving, right? Eat without worry." A gentle smile crossed his face as he realized the note was from his mother. Grateful and content, he savored each bite of the meal, relishing its flavors after a long and exhausting day at work. The dish surpassed his expectations, bursting with flavor in every bite. Fully satisfied after dinner, he made his way to the bathroom, where he discovered the tub already filled with steaming water and gleaming spotlessly clean. Yoshio smiled, warmed by his mother's gentle care. As he soaked in the bath, gratitude filled his thoughts and a soft, contented smile spread across his face. After his bath, he took a moment to inspect his clothes. Glancing at the monitor, he saw that the entire village had already drifted into slumber. He greeted his mother warmly as he entered, and she offered lunch. Over the meal, he shared that co-workers were welcoming, but he'd work the night shift again. She smiled, asked about dinner, and notified him of another package before he left. Intrigued, he untied the package and discovered a small clump of soil nestled inside. He instantly realized that the package had come from Carol. The villagers believed only one tribute could be sent daily, though 2 were allowed. Carol ignored this, offering smooth stones, dorodango, and now intricately carved wood. Yoshio, impressed by her progress, watched her craft with interest. Carol excitedly announced she was finished. Yoshio watched in awe as she proudly showed her new creation to Mollis, eagerly asking him to guess. Mollis guessed the god of fate, and Carol beamed with joy, confirming he was right. Yoshio carefully placed the small clump of earth into his cabinet, the same place where he kept every keepsake Carol had ever given him. To outsiders, these trinkets might seem worthless, but to him and Carol, they were treasures beyond compare. He wondered if the handcrafted items were made by the game's staff or by Carol herself in the virtual world, yet part of him stubbornly believed they truly came from Carol, a belief that warmed his heart, no matter how absurd it seemed. Exhausted, Yoshio went to bed, glad to rest aching muscles. As he relaxed, grateful to be helping and earning, he imagined his mother's joy at his efforts and hoped good sleep would speed his recovery. Yoshio was praised for his diligence despite his quirks. Jokes and laughter followed among colleagues and the manager, creating a warm, welcoming atmosphere. Yoshio felt truly happy and valued in his very first job. The atmosphere turned out to be so warm and captivating, drawing me in with its inviting charm. After his night shift ended, Yoshio warmly bid farewell to co-workers as the manager thanked everyone. He walked home, resolved to resist evil temptation for the villagers' sake, and smiled as he caught up on his game's conversation log. He noticed an entry in the journal recording a conversation between Hams, Carol, and Shem. Hams appeared somewhat weary, prompting Shem to suggest he take a break and rest for a while. Carol invited him to rest beside her, seeing his exhaustion. Shem noted Carol spoke to her older brother, which Yoshio ignored. Bored, he watched Rhodus tell Layla he was learning antidote making, but couldn't guarantee results yet. They debated whether they should intervene, knowing that if they did nothing, these refugees would surely fall victim to the evil god's temptation. They also recalled how, long ago, the people who once lived here were completely wiped out. Suddenly, someone pointed out a single lingering worry. They would only receive a blessing from the god of faith. The man suggested they refrain from taking any action and simply observe the unfolding events in silence. Yet the moment the refugees set foot on their sacred soil, they became intensely vigilant, their eyes keenly searching for the perfect chance to make their move. They stood poised to subject the aliens to the harshest trial nature herself could devise. As Yoshio read over their conversation, genuine astonishment flickered across his face when he realized that Mollis was a spy. Yoshio could hardly believe his eyes when he stumbled upon this astonishing truth. This revelation showed him why he was treated as a guest, not an ally. He learned Mollis was from a woodland tribe that still resented the villagers for settling on their ancestral lands. Yet now the villagers finally felt safe, for the Mollisi had realized that they were under the protection of the very god of faith himself. The thought relieved Yoshio, as he believed the Mollis' arrival had already aided them. Seeing dusk outside, he postponed the prophecy to hint at the Mollis' true nature, then went to bed and soon slept peacefully. The next morning, as sunlight poured through the windows, breakfast was underway. After Yoshio spoke, he sensed Mollis' fear of the god of fate. Gams suggested trusting the god to overcome hardship. Yoshio, relieved to have discouraged Mollis, saw he had 350 fate points and hoped to earn enough to buy more for his golem. Excited by thoughts of using the golem with the treasures, he went to the manager's office and learned that Yamamoto was out sick. The manager confirmed it, adding they'd finish early today since only 3 staff were needed. After finishing the task, the manager warmly thanked Yoshio, saying it would have been harder without him. Pleased, Yoshio went home, where his cheerful mother offered to reheat dinner, making him wonder if something special had happened. Uncertainty gripped him, leaving him paralyzed with hesitation. Just as he finally mustered the courage to speak with his father, his mother suddenly made an announcement. Suddenly, his mother announced that dinner was ready, her voice brimming with an unusual energy. Curiosity got the better of him, and he couldn't resist asking directly. There was something undeniably unusual about her energy, an aura that crackled with intensity. Unable to contain his curiosity, he asked her directly. After spending a little time with them, he decided to quietly slip away, giving them space to enjoy their privacy undisturbed. He glanced at Mollis, sprawled on the bed and deep in thought. Yoshiko first hoped Mollis would leave on his own, but since the villagers depended on him, he instead watched Mollis closely, rather than forcing him out. Overwhelmed by exhaustion, he decided that the wisest choice at this moment was simply to go to bed. Suddenly, he realized that the porridge was actually enclosed within a square frame. Just as Yoshio was about to go to bed, a genuine dialogue box unexpectedly appeared on the screen. The window before him was an exact replica of the one that haunted Gamma's dreams. Yet curiosity proved irresistible. Before surrendering to sleep, Yoshio resolved to take a peek inside. When he pressed the button, an image of a modern house flickered onto the screen. He zoomed in, carefully examining the entryway, the hallway, the bathroom, and the kitchen, his eyes sweeping over every detail. Suddenly, to his astonishment, vivid images of his home appeared, every angle shown in detail. Confused and unsure how to return to the game's main screen, he saw someone in the bathroom. Zooming in, he realized it was Sayuki. He could even make out the little dialogue boxes where she chatted to herself while showering. Panic seized him. If this was real, and his sister ever discovered that he'd been spying on her, she would have killed him, no doubt. The boy, telling himself it was a dream, relaxed, then overheard his mother ask why his father hid her annual anniversary gift, finally grasping her unusually cheerful mood's cause. Yoshio watched happily as his parents connected and talked more easily than in years. Still, he felt a bit awkward. Then he heard his father admit he felt distant from Mom for the past 10 years, despite her liking the gift. Mother asked if it was because of Yoshio, and father confirmed it. The revelation stunned Yoshio, making the pain in his heart feel real and sharp. He remembered how calm his father used to be before he changed into someone else. He poured his heart and soul into everything he did, never holding back, no matter the task. Whenever Yoshio struggled with his studies at school, his father would patiently break everything down, explaining each concept in a clear and simple way. Whenever his mother scolded him and he couldn't hold back his tears, his father would secretly comfort him, slipping him his favorite ice cream as a quiet gesture of support. Tears welled up in his eyes, but just then he heard his mother's voice, remarking how his performances had grown so much more captivating ever since he started working. "Do we have a deal?" Besides, he finally admitted that he had long wanted to apologize for the hurtful words he once spoke. The discussion revolved around a claim that Yoshio wasn't putting in enough effort, or perhaps not even trying at all, to find a job. A laugh escaped Mother as she reminisced about Yoshiro's carefree and joyful days as a student, recalling how much he delighted in lively gatherings and exuberant parties. The dog, visibly embarrassed, confessed that back in those days, his behavior was even worse than Yoshio's. He nearly failed his studies altogether. He confessed that he had no moral right to reproach Yoshio, and this realization filled him with genuine guilt. The moment Yoshio caught sight of his father, a wave of unbearable pain and crushing guilt washed over him. Yoshio glimpsed real disappointment in his father's eyes, but knew it wasn't his fault. To him, his father was still a towering figure he had admired with unwavering reverence since childhood. Yoshio watched as his mother and father spoke with heartfelt sincerity, their words weaving a gentle closeness between them, and tears streamed down his cheeks. He overheard his parents admit they also needed to change. Though it was just a dream, it comforted Shio to realize his seemingly perfect parents also faced struggles and worries, making them feel closer and more relatable. It seemed as if a gentle relief had settled over everyone's hearts. Awaking at his keyboard, Yoshio allowed himself a gentle smile. Even if it had all been just a dream, the feelings it left behind lingered, precious and undeniably real. Although these dreams seemed crafted especially for him, he felt no concern at all. He headed to the kitchen, where his family was already gathered for breakfast. With a bright smile, he cheerfully wished everyone good morning. His sister glanced up at him, a hint of surprise flickering in her eyes. On November 30th, Yoshio dashed down the street, his footsteps echoing in the crisp air. Gasping for breath and filled with anxiety, he couldn't comprehend how he'd ended up in such a predicament. He found himself ensnared by the seductive power of the sinister god, unable to break free from the dark temptations that now ruled over him. 2 days ago, on November 28th, he watched villagers on screen working hard to prepare for the ominous god's trial, fixing walls, building a watchtower, and saw Mollis atop it, expertly slaying a monster with his bow. Mollis's remarkable accuracy earned Rhodus's sincere thanks. Yoshio wondered if, when the evil god tempted him, Mollis would stay or vanish. As villagers reinforced defenses, Yoshio felt both reassured and burdened by responsibility. If by some twist of fate he were to suffer a defeat, even by sheer accident, he feared it would shatter his fragile confidence and drag him back into the old abyss of apathy. Yoshio made up his mind. He would never let that happen. Deep down, he understood one thing: he simply couldn't afford to lose. Every accomplishment in his life was earned through his own determination and hard work. Thanks to the steady income from his daily side jobs, he would soon have enough to summon a golem. Thanks to his extensive experience with video games, Yoshio brimmed with confidence, certain he could conquer any challenge, even if the controls turned out to be fiendishly complicated. As Gams inspected weapons, worried Carol quietly asked if they could withstand the day of temptation when the evil god releases monsters. Gams reassured her, and she hugged him in relief, until Hem arrived, irritated, and reminded Carol he was her brother. Carol laughed, teasing that her stepsister could scare even the bravest. Hem ignored her. Swallowing her feelings, she asked Gams if they could face what lay ahead. Silence fell as Rhodus mourned her lost village, sorrow silencing all. Breaking the silence, Mollis warned of the perilous, monster-filled forbidden forest, admitting he always avoids it when tempted by the evil god, and regretfully apologizing for not warning them earlier. Kem reassured him, praising his invaluable help to the village. Watching, Yoshio saw Mollis as trustworthy, despite not knowing him well. Gams noted leaving the village was tough since their wagon's wheels were nearly broken, and no one could fix them. None had repair skills, making escape seemingly impossible, yet Mollis noted that whether he and Gams tried alone or together, there was still a slight chance they could succeed. With others present, fighting was their only option. Gams, briefly disappointed, regained resolve and vowed to protect everyone. His determination eased those nearby. He then thanked Mollis, stressing he wouldn't force him to fight. Gams shook Mollis's hand with heartfelt gratitude, while Mollis himself looked somewhat taken aback by the gesture. Yoshio sensed everyone's expectation that Mollis would soon leave, so Mollis kindly asked them not to mourn, explained his family awaited him, promised to leave medicinal herbs, and decided to depart that very night. Carol asked if he was really planning to leave, and he apologized. Her words cheered him, and at her invitation to play again, he promised to return. Though Malasteri watched villagers, Yoshi sensed no malice, smiled, donned his jacket, and left for work to operate a giant liquid-sucking vacuum. Meanwhile, his supervisor was polishing the floor with a special buffing cloth. Misaki diligently scrubbed away the spilled liquid, while Yamamoto washed the floor with meticulous care. Once their work was finished, they decided to take a well-earned break and catch their breath. Yoshi tried to respond politely, but Yamamoto immediately caught the fleeting expression on his face and remarked. When Yamamoto learned they were the same age, he relaxed and became friendly. Yoshi soon saw Yamamoto was a true gamer, collecting consoles and playing in internet cafes. Both agreed computers beat smartphones, especially for a hikikomori. After their conversation, Yoshio turned to Yamamoto with a spark of curiosity in her eyes, asking if any exciting new games had come out recently. Yamamoto recalled being captivated by a game with stunning graphics and thrilling gameplay, but couldn't remember its name, only that it involved destruction. Yoshio was disappointed, but soon forgot, preoccupied with Village of Fate. As he entered his room, his gaze was immediately drawn to the computer screen, which was displaying the moment when Mollis emerged from the cave. On the desk before him lay several vials filled with various healing elixirs. Beside each vial rested a neatly written note, meticulously describing its unique properties and the recommended dosage for use. Seeing this, he smiled, realizing Mollis wasn't truly bad and hoping he'd return someday, perhaps when the villagers resisted the evil god. On November 29th, Gam watched from the tower, surveying the village and horizon. The anxious villagers prayed and worked in their cave. Yoshio, wanting to boost their spirits, wrote a letter acknowledging their fears and vowing support, urging both self-reliance and openness to the golem's help if needed. Relieved, they felt hope. Energized by their improved mood, Yoshio grew curious about the golem, though he didn't know how to awaken it. Restless, he cooked a hearty meal and ate lunch in peace. Suddenly, Yoshio's boss called. Worried he'd erred, Yoshio was reassured by praise for his work, but was asked to help with an urgent, understaffed job. Since he oversaw the villagers, he asked how long it'd take and got a clear answer. He was also informed that the task would be completed no later than 9 in the evening, so Yoshio, seeing no cause for concern, readily agreed to lend a hand. After the boss praised him for helping when Yama's sudden leave put the team in a pinch, Yoshio wondered why Yama, who seemed fine, took off. Still, he couldn't blame him, and felt good for pitching in as he finished dinner. After that, he set off for work. Once he'd completed his tasks, he noticed their manager conversing with a client, yet not making any alterations to the contract they had already finalized. Occasionally, clients tried to extend cleaning services while SIO observed. At 9:15, his supervisor suggested leaving for errands, but Yoshi decided to stay, calculating they'd finish in an hour with all three working, which suited him. As they finished their work and began heading back, a police officer suddenly appeared, announcing that an accident had blocked the road ahead. Yoshio glanced at his watch. It was already 12:37. Anxiety began to grip you, stirred by the temptation woven by the malicious god. A ripple of unease swept through you, haunted by the thought that monsters might have descended upon the village and wiped out every last inhabitant. He politely asked his boss to stop the car so he could walk the rest of the way home. The boss apologized for the delay, but Yoshio assured him it was no trouble at all. With that, Yoshio took off, jogging eagerly toward his house. Lost in thought, I reflected on how a single setback seems to set off a chain reaction, each misfortune summoning another in its wake. Hoping against hope, he wished today would spare him from yet more misfortune. He kept running until 1 o'clock, finally reaching home, breathless and exhausted. As he gasped for air, he wondered how many years had passed since he last dashed like this, wild and headlong. Wasting no time, he dashed into his room and fixed his gaze intently upon him. He held his breath, eyes fixed intently on the screen, silently willing for the villagers to be safe. He immediately began inspecting everything, leaving no detail unchecked. Gams, clutching his sturdy staff, stood watch atop the guard tower, his keen eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of trouble, while the rest of the villagers slept peacefully, wrapped in the quiet embrace of the night. Seeing no sign of a monster attack, Yoshio let out a relieved sigh. Suddenly, his sister appeared at the door, disapproval on her face as she scolded him for the noise. Gasping and drenched in sweat, Yoshio glanced at her and stammered an excuse about urgent matters needing his attention. Yoshio, already standing in the doorway, promised he wouldn't trouble them any further. With that, he gently closed the door behind him, fading away in silence. She noticed that he was drenched in sweat, his work clothes stained with grime, and asked if he'd like to take a shower. Yoshio averted his gaze, mumbling that he'd wash up soon, but she saw right through his lie. She noticed a quirk. When he told the truth, his eyes shifted left. Glancing at the computer, she asked why he'd left it on so much lately. "Brian," she prompted, curiosity clear in her voice. Was something unusual happening? Her knowing surprised him. When asked, she said their mother told her, and specifically told her not to turn off the computer. Yoshio recalled warning his mother himself, so it made sense she'd tell his sister too. Yoshio, unable to tell his sister the game's secrets due to strict penalties, said he was a beta tester. She suspiciously agreed to watch the game during his shower, while he urged her to call him if monsters attacked, then hurried to bathe quickly. Yoshio returned freshly showered, thanked his sister, and shrugged off her teasing about rushing to clean up. He asked about the game. She said nothing had changed except Gams not moving and praised the visuals. When she noticed he seemed secretive, Yoshio admitted he was hiding something, but insisted it wasn't serious. When pressed, he silently confirmed he couldn't share it, not even with family. Accepting this, his sister went to bed and quietly closed the door. Yoshio remained seated, lost in thought, as he pondered just how much time had slipped by since they last shared such a long conversation. As he watched their bond gradually return to its former warmth, a genuine sense of happiness welled up within him. Settling comfortably into place, he scanned the virtual cave with a keen eye, but not a single trace of monsters met his gaze. He rallied his spirits, determined to give it everything he had. As Yoshio grabbed a snack after a sleepless night, he reflected on how staying up was harder now. With no attack by dawn, he greeted his family, explained he'd been online for work, and earned a proud nod from his father. Returning to his room, he found the game unchanged. Villagers were busy. Hamzen and Rodis took guard shifts, while women prayed and cleaned. Conflicted, he almost wished for a monster attack, curious to see what would happen. At the same time, he secretly wished the day would pass quietly, untouched by any turmoil or unexpected events. Suddenly, his eyes caught something out of the ordinary. An announcement flashed. The evil god's temptation had begun. Gam gripped his spear, ready for battle. Yoshio saw 5 shadowy hounds darting forward, recalling the deadly venom in their fangs. Yo hesitated, wondering if the dogs might finally give up. The path ahead didn't look easy for them, but suddenly, one of the hounds sprang backward, crouched low, then dashed forward and, with a powerful leap, soared effortlessly over the fence. Gam stood his ground fearlessly and, in a split second, drove his spear straight through him. Yoshio let out a sigh of relief as he watched his opponent fall in an instant, utterly defeated. Yet 4 more dogs lunged at him with the exact same furious assault. Gamsu took down 2 more enemies, but the last pair reached the village. Even Yoshio showed unease as danger neared, yet Gamsu, without hesitation, hurled himself at one of the surviving dogs. At last, he sprang into action, delivering a decisive blow that would determine the outcome. With lightning speed, he obliterated his opponent. Now, only a final, face-to-face showdown with the last hound remained. Gams lunged forward, slipping beneath his foe in a swift motion. With a powerful thrust, he drove his spear upward, striking the enemy from below. After felling this foe as well, Yoshio turned his gaze toward Gams, who, just then, Carolyn and Cham arrived, excitedly encouraging Gams, who warned them not to approach in case more monsters were nearby. Rodus reassured everyone, saying he sensed no threats and that the area was safe. The village had faced attacks from wild boars and black hounds alike, yet time and again, a bold and decisive counterattack proved to be their strongest shield. The boars charged the barricade like living battering rams, while the black dogs tried to leap over it. Each time they tried to leap across, Gams was already lying in wait, spear poised. With a single swift strike, he knocked them out of the air. Yoshio noticed the uncanny precision with which the attacks occurred. Monsters would strike every 30 to 60 minutes, maintaining a relentless, almost rhythmic tempo. Kem could tend to Gam's minor wounds after each attack, swiftly healing what she could. Still, Yoshio knew all too well, if the assaults continued relentlessly, Gam's strength would inevitably run out. He saw Layla cooking and, enticed by the smell, headed to the kitchen. His mother asked if he'd join dinner, but he apologized, saying he had to work, promising to eat later, even as she tempted him with his favorite fried chicken. Grabbing a handful of snacks, he climbed the stairs to his room, promising himself he'd definitely find a moment later to treat himself to some fried chicken. Yoshio returned to find 4 black hounds and 3 wild boars closing in. Rodas, stationed atop the tower, sounded the alarm. Everyone fled to the cavern while Gams guarded the entrance, spearing hounds as they leapt the fence. The enemy leader launched a fierce assault, shattering the defenders' line. Yoshio hesitated to summon the main force, unsure if it was too soon with 5 hours left before sunset. With a swift strike of his spear, Gamsu ambushed and took down one of the border guards. Now he found himself face to face with yet another wild boar, forced into a new and perilous confrontation. The wild boar lunged at him with ferocious speed, but, with a swift motion, he drove his spear straight through the boar's skull. Yoshio cheered with boundless excitement, celebrating Gamza's victory with infectious enthusiasm. Gamza wiped the sweat from his brow and swiftly surveyed the fence, realizing with urgency that it needed immediate repairs. Yet Layla insisted he take a break and rest while she was in the hospital. She, along with the others, hurriedly sprang into action to repair the fence, working with swift determination. Yoshio watched with delight as they worked together seamlessly, and before long the fence stood repaired. Suddenly, Yoshio's eyes flew wide open in shock. A horde of nearly 20 monsters was charging straight toward them. Gams wasted no time. He commanded everyone to return to the cave at once. The final wave of attackers flashed onto Yoshio's screen. It was the climax of the battle, the decisive moment upon which everything hung. A radiant smile lit up his face, and suddenly his heart felt both lighter and tinged with excitement. Yoshio understood. This was the final surge of his ordeal. Amidst his enemies, he spotted familiar monsters from the earliest days of the game. The very ones who ambushed our wagons. He scoured through their records only to uncover a single clue, the name Green Goblin. He noticed that these goblins were armed with wooden clubs and appeared far more cunning than usual. Unlike other monsters, these goblins behaved almost like humans, moving in perfect harmony, strategizing with uncanny intelligence. Meanwhile, the wild boars had already smashed through the fence and, by now, all the monsters had already slipped inside. Geem sized his spear, bracing himself for the clash ahead, but suddenly something unexpected happened. Suddenly, a wild boar charged straight into Game at full speed, sending him flying backward through the air. Cham stood frozen in shock, struggling to keep her composure as the chaos unfolded before her eyes. Rhodus gently grabbed her arm to calm her. Layla rushed to stop Chams from lunging at Gams. Stunned, Yoshio hesitated, then called the golem. The screen flashed white. Now, from the golem's eyes, Yoshio saw he was inside the cave. With the remote control in hand, he deftly guided the golem, directing each of its movements with precision and intent. In his right hand, a sword gleamed fiercely. As he drew near, the villagers scrambled to their feet in alarm. Their eyes flew wide open in astonishment as the realization struck them. The statue was actually moving. They believed a god of faith resided here. With unwavering resolve, Yoshio urged the golem toward the exit, silently vowing to rescue Gams no matter the cost. Meanwhile, though grievously wounded, Gams refused to surrender his resolve. With unwavering resolve, he declared that he would never allow the monsters to pass, even if it meant sacrificing his own life. Suddenly, the green goblin lunged forward, launching a fierce attack. Gamzu broke free from captivity as the golden one prepared to strike, but Yoshio appeared, swiftly slaying the monster. Inspired by Gamzu's heroism, he fought off the incoming black hounds with precise blows from his sword. He felt a surge of pride at how effortlessly he had dispatched his enemies, grateful that he had saved up his skill points for just such a moment. Drawing on memories of past clashes, he effortlessly dismantled his foes this time, anticipating their attack patterns and maneuvers with practiced precision. As Yoshio got used to the controls, he wished to play as his main character. Spotting a button for changing perspectives, he pressed it out of curiosity, and the view instantly switched to third person. Now, the screen allowed him to watch both his own character and the golem he controlled at the same time. The figure on the screen was nothing like he had imagined. All his expectations dissolved as he gazed at the unfamiliar image, leaving him startled and uncertain. In that moment, a realization struck him, a flash of insight. This was the very wooden structure he had been searching for all along. The very heart that Gams and Kem carved out themselves. She embodied the very essence of the god of faith. Once every last monster had been vanquished, a message suddenly appeared. The temptation of the evil god had finally come to an end. A surge of joy and relief washed over Yoshio, for at last he had succeeded in saving all the villagers. Yoshio swelled with pride over his bold action, but a sudden realization struck him. He could no longer alter the course he had set for himself. A message flashed across the screen, accompanied by a chilling explanation. A fatal incident, the victim claimed by the relentless golem. Points steadily drained away, and as soon as they hit 0, the golem was activated. Only once per day, as another message stated. Yoshioka was astonished and left speechless by the extravagance and cost of this indulgence. He was amazed at how fast thousands of yen disappeared, likening it to mobile games where money is key. Yet seeing the locals' joyful faces brought him relief and lifted his spirits despite his initial disheartenment. Yoshioka felt proud after defending the villagers and optimistically wrote a prophecy assuring them the attacks were over and praising their resilience. Overjoyed, they respectfully returned the statue to the altar. The villagers clasped their hands in heartfelt prayer, expressing their deep gratitude for his help. Meanwhile, Yoshi carefully scanned the surroundings, ensuring everything was safe, and he soon noticed that the bodies of the fallen couldn't simply vanish as they do in many games. Instead, they remained where they fell, stark and lifelike, demanding to be dealt with just as in the real world. He noticed an arrow jutting from the body of one of the boars and instantly realized Mollis had come to their aid as well. The next day at work, Yamaha apologized to Yoshio for his absence last month and thanked him for covering his shift. Over drinks, Yamaha confessed he'd missed work for a limited-time in-game event, asking Yoshio not to tell their boss. Yoshio laughed, expecting a date invite, but Yamashi, a bit anxious, clarified he'd taken the day off for an unmissable game event. After chatting about their gaming tastes, Yoshio enjoyed the conversation and left for home content. Yoshio watched with a gentle smile as the villagers worked with tireless dedication. Glancing at his faith points, he noticed with quiet satisfaction that their number had risen slightly. Most likely, this turn of events was fueled by the villagers' gratitude. He noticed Rodus and Gams dragging the monster's carcass behind them, guessing they intended to present the beast to him as an offering. This meant that fresh meat awaited him tomorrow. Remembering he needed to clear some space in the fridge, he headed for the kitchen. Just then, Sayuki turned to him with a bright smile and cheerfully announced that she was home. As he prepared his dinner, he glanced her way and asked if she'd like to join him. She eagerly agreed. When he served her dinner, Sayuki praised the dish with delight, remarking on how delicious it looked and thanking him sincerely. Then, wanting to express her gratitude, she asked him for a kiss. Yoshio smelled alcohol on her and wondered if she was tipsy. She ate with childlike delight, but when she was late again and he gently asked if she was okay, she barely responded, a trace of unease in her manner. Yoshio, sensing something was wrong, gently asked his sister to share her troubles, admitting he wasn't perfect but talking might help. After a pause, she confessed she felt someone was watching or following her, even near the store. Yoshio instantly wondered if the same relentless pursuer from his past had resurfaced once more. Yoshio told her what happened and admitted he'd been worried about her late returns. Surprised, she asked if he cared that much. Yoshio nodded earnestly, promising he'd always be her big brother no matter what. She confessed that she once believed he truly hated her, while he, on his part, saw it as only natural if she disliked him. Smiling softly, she added that her older brother was starting to resemble his old self more and more each day. "You seem much calmer lately, even cooler," she said admiringly. Yoshi reminded her to call if delayed. He'd pick her up. He admitted he might not always answer at night, but promised to be more careful after her warning. She realized that lingering embers of fear still flickered within her soul. This time, he vowed he would protect her, no matter what. The following day, after finishing his work, Yoshio made his way home. Yoshio's boss gave him a ride and dropped him off right at that very spot. As Yoshio wandered through the shop, his eyes carefully scanned every corner, taking in each detail around him. Haunted by thoughts of Sayuki's stalker, Yoshio glanced around warily, half expecting the figure to appear. While shopping for groceries, he was suddenly transported back to the days spent confined to his hospital bed. Fortunately, he wasn't seriously harmed, but Sayuki couldn't stop crying. Later, both got apology letters, but they were empty, lifeless, and insincere, devoid of any real meaning. After picking up his groceries, Yoshio set off for home. On his way home, Yoshio noticed someone struggling to pick something up from the ground. Without a moment's hesitation, he walked over to offer his help. He quickly realized it was Seika, his childhood friend. Without a second thought, he offered to help her pick up the fallen item, earning a heartfelt thank you in return. She noted how much time had slipped by since they had last seen each other. Seiko had been Yoshio's childhood friend, living just next door. Their friendship bloomed from their earliest years, the two growing up side by side as constant companions. After graduation, she got her dream job at a top company, while he became increasingly isolated. For years, Seiko visited and sent heartfelt letters, but Yoshio, ashamed of his situation, never had the courage to reply. After a decade apart, they met again. Yoshio noticed her leg and asked with concern if she was okay. Saya tersenyum dan menjelaskan bahwa dia baru saja terperangkap dalam pikiran pada tangga dan terjatuh sementara bermimpi. He advised her to be careful, teasingly recalling her childhood tree-climbing fall. Embarrassed, Saya asked him to stop, then inquired about his new outfit. He confessed to working at a cleaning company, which she wholeheartedly supported. He suggested she head home and warm herself up. She smiled warmly and said she was truly glad to catch up again after all this time apart. Especially since this was their first meeting in a decade, he was struck by how unchanged Seika looked. Yet his expression tightened, barely believing she was really speaking. It seemed almost too incredible to accept. She spoke kindly to Yoshio, trying to relate, but her independent adult life contrasted with his inexperience, leaving him disheartened. Seika returned, mentioning a new dessert cafe, and nervously invited him to go with her. She suggested they visit a cafe together once her leg healed. The proposal left Yo stunned and flustered, her mind swirling with surprise and confusion. He likely replied that he too enjoyed sweets. Her face lit up with a bright, joyful smile at his words, and she promised to write to him again later, already brimming with anticipation for his next message. Embarrassed, she rushed home, leaving Yoshio confused, unsure if it was a date. Excited yet conflicted about Sayuki's stalker, his racing heart puzzled him until his mother greeted him in the kitchen with a warm smile. His mother called that dinner was ready. Yoshio smiled, hiding his uncertainty. She said she'd send a photo of the lizard and asked if he'd see it when he returned. He promised he'd bring the lizard home, assuring her not to worry. She caught a peculiar note in his smile and wondered if something was amiss. A few days later, he finally had a day off. Settling in front of his computer, he looked forward to losing himself in his favorite games at last. Yoshi paused. Sayuki had stopped mentioning her stalker. Maybe it was just her imagination. He thought about his Sunday date with Sika and the tough, wicked god in the game, for which he still needed to prepare. He pondered over his predicament, realizing that he could resort to his ultimate goal only as a last desperate measure. Burdened by restrictions, Yoshio couldn't accept the idea and worried that Gams was still the only defender. Hoping for a solution, he saw Mollis return to a warm welcome, Carol joyfully embracing him, wishing he'd rejoin them. Melissa, visibly flustered, apologized for running off alone, admitting her actions were nothing short of disgraceful. Balela, however, gently comforted him, assuring that everyone was simply grateful, and no one harbored a single complaint. Kim added thoughtfully that it must have been a sign from the god of faith. Yoshio admired the villagers' warmth and generosity. He liked every one of them. Gams thanked Mollis for his invaluable support, and Mollis modestly said he'd only helped. Humbly, Mollis asked for a favor, and Gams offered assistance. At that moment, Mollis revealed he wasn't a doctor, but a member of the elusive race dwelling in the Forbidden Forest. He admitted to watching them since they first crossed the forest's concealed boundary. Yoshio wondered if Mollis, with his unusual ears, was an elf. Suddenly, Hem sharply asked Mollis if he now understood the evil god's peril in the forest, stunning Yoshio. Mollis apologized, noting the last attack felt unusually coordinated. The monster's strange, increasingly coordinated ferocity unsettled Gams and Rhodus, who'd never seen or heard of such organized attacks. Gams turned to Malice, who revealed his village too had fallen to the evil god's influence. The words left everyone, including Yoshio, in shocked silence. Despite the Malice's ancient presence and defenses, nothing had saved them. Their village and every trace of it had been utterly destroyed. Mollis said the village faced an unprecedented attack, waves of increasingly terrifying monsters sent by a shadowy figure. When Gam asked if anyone could be saved, Mollis, grieving, shook his head. The village was lost. He also pointed out that there were no survivors, and the bodies of nearly 10 children were never recovered. This led him to suspect that the children had been taken to the monster's lair. A sharp sorrow gripped Yoshio's heart as he imagined how agonizing and unbearable this ordeal must have been for Mollis. Mollis speculated that perhaps the children were still alive, yet deep down, Yoshio realized worrying might be pointless. Suddenly, Gam stood and declared, "Let's go," surprising Hema and Mollis. Hema quickly grabbed her weapon to join, while Rhodia sensibly suggested they prepare food and water. So he entrusted the task to Layla. Deeply moved by their willingness to help, Mollis offered heartfelt thanks to them both. Yoshio felt proud of his friends from the sidelines, but also a bit sad, wishing he could help more. Unable to use his prophecy or summon the golem, he decided to support his companions from afar with silent encouragement. She also reminded him that they were under the divine protection of the god of faith himself. The idea struck a chord with Yoshio. He believed he could guide them by following the prophecies and leave the rest in Gam's capable hands. Realizing her decision was final, Gams reluctantly agreed. Then Carol handed him a small statue of the god of fate, delicately carved by her own hands. Chemre reassured everyone they'd be back soon and urged them to take care. Layla and Rhodis said not to worry and to return if needed. Carol smiled, promised to cook something delicious, and wait eagerly for their return. Gams and Chief Malice set out on their journey, their sights firmly fixed on their ultimate goal. Yoshio noticed that Mola had discovered the exact location they needed. Yet what truly irked him was that he could do nothing but watch, powerless to intervene. They paused by the riverbank, allowing themselves a moment of rest and quiet as the gentle flow of water whispered nearby. They sat down and refreshed themselves with a few cool sips of water. Yoshio saw Kem was exhausted after their long journey. Melis hoped few monsters remained, as many died with villagers, but feared green goblins, likely child kidnappers, survived. Yoshio deeply worried about the children's safety and grim future. After a brief rest, Mala announced it was time to go. As they resumed the journey, he noticed something suspicious, warned the group, and they hid behind bushes just in time to spot several people nearby. In this area, green goblins have begun to appear. Yoshio counted a total of 9 of them. Yoshio deemed it too risky for Mollis and Gams to face the goblins directly. Mollison noted clearer skies made sneaking harder, sparking Yoshio to recall the game's weather control. He selected downpour, hoping rain would help them. The moment torrential rains was chosen, the race was on. A glowing circle appeared on the screen, marking where Yoshio could summon rain. Expanding its radius cost more 5-point units, so he carefully adjusted the size to balance effectiveness and efficiency. I chose a size just large enough for the circle to perfectly cover the area where the goblins were gathered. The moment rain was certain of it, a sudden downpour burst from the sky, drenching everything in an instant. The 3 friends looked up in astonishment, their eyes locking onto the green dog soaring across the sky. The goblins dashed headlong toward their tents, desperate to escape the torrential downpour. And you will always remember this, it is a sign from God himself, a testament of faith. Gams instructed Chim to grip her gear tightly and move with utmost caution. Chim concealed his weapon and crouched silently behind the bushes, waiting in tense anticipation. Meanwhile, Gums and Molos pressed onward, forging ahead with determined strides, silently slipping through the darkness. We silently wiped out the goblins lurking within. Before long, they had taken complete control of the situation. They defeated every last goblin without suffering a single casualty among their ranks. Yet, despite their efforts, the children remained nowhere to be found. Yoshi watched intently as they prepared to move the announcement, his gaze sharp and attentive, eager to catch every detail of the operation. Only one place remained unexplored. Gams pointed to the spot and offered to lead the way inside. But the moment he lunged toward the cave, a colossal beast suddenly burst forth from its depths. Everyone stood in stunned silence, awestruck by the sheer enormity of the monster. He narrowly dodged the oncoming attack, his sword flashing as he swept it up just in time. Mollis let an arrow fly straight at the beast, yet the creature deflected it with effortless ease. You were genuinely astonished. You've seen for yourself just how tough this monster's hide is. You found yourself wondering if defeating such a creature was even possible. Doubt crept into your thoughts, making you question whether victory was within reach. You investigate the creature and discover that it belongs to the ogre family, beings notorious for their monstrous strength and a bottomless appetite for human flesh. The Cyclops lunged at Gams with a furious blow, but Gams always managed to stay one step ahead, effortlessly dodging each attack. Gams dodged the blow with lightning-fast reflexes and launched a swift counterattack, but Cyclops managed to block it just in time with his weapon. Blows flew non-stop as the duel raged on, while Mollis kept launching arrow after arrow at the Cyclops, never pausing, relentless in his assault. Arrows splintered on the beast's impenetrable hide. Stunned, Yoshiro realized he'd never faced such a formidable creature, and if Gams took a direct hit, the situation could become dire immediately. Realizing ordinary arrows were useless, Mollis had to use his clan's secret, deadly poison. No one had survived it. But a new problem arose. He lacked the strength to pierce the Cyclops' nearly impenetrable hide. Yoshio realized their options were swiftly running out. He wondered if he could use the prophecy as a pretext to command them to flee. He doubted they could escape the Crimson Cyclops unscathed. Briefly, he considered having Gams stay behind to hold off the monster while the others fled, but the notion struck him as... The situation teetered on the edge of danger, and Yoshio found himself deep in thought, urgently searching for a way to turn things around. He hastily outlined his strategy, disguising it as a prophecy for them, and he activated the miracle of the Thundervault, narrowing its effect to the smallest possible area. Just as the Cyclops was about to lunge at Gams, the moment hung suspended in the air. Yoshio summoned a raging storm. A bolt of lightning struck the monster with a deafening crack. Although the blow didn't bring the monster crashing down, the weak spot of the giant Chinalope was finally revealed. And in that very instant, Mollis drew back the bowstring, knocking an arrow with practiced precision. He fixed his sights on both the poison and the boy, preparing to strike at them both in a single, calculated move. He staked his very fate on it, setting it down as if it were an unyielding statue. He took careful aim, his weapon trained directly at the Cyclops' gaping maw. But the arrow never reached its mark. The monster managed to deflect the arrow with its weapon just in time. Moving with lightning speed, Yoshio instantly unleashed the summoning power of the miracle. Yoshio summoned a golem, solidifying his dominance once and for all. Inside the Cyclops' gaping maw, the creature's massive jaws clamped down tightly around his neck. A chilling realization crept in. Something truly terrible was unfolding. Yoshio relayed the prophecy that became the foundation of their plan and carefully chose who would be involved. It was his responsibility to ensure that everything was properly taken care of. The poison reached the Cyclops. The plan unfolded flawlessly. Within moments, the monster began to feel the poison coursing through its body. In an instant, he collapsed to the ground, life slipping away in the very same breath. Yoshio beamed with pride, elated by their hard-fought victory. The thrill of overcoming their foe together filled him with a deep sense of accomplishment. Once the Cyclops had been defeated, it was time to rescue the children. Gam volunteered to enter first, determined to make sure no enemies remained lurking inside. After a while he returned, his face shadowed by gloom and sadness. He turned to Mollis, asking her to go inside and see for herself what awaited them. Kem also wanted to join, but Hams, playing the part of a protective older brother, insisted she stay back. He didn't want her to witness what lay within. Overwhelmed by despair, Mollis collapsed, thanking Gams and Kem for their support. Gams encouraged him, noting everyone's grief. Yoshio watched, tearful, as Kem gently sought Mollis's consent to pray for the children, which he gave. Yoshio watched in silence as the children were laid to rest in the earth. He found himself pondering how most games usually gloss over moments like these, yet this one fearlessly laid bare the raw, unfiltered meaning of life and death. After laying the children to rest and praying, Kem suggested returning to the village. Gam agreed, noting everyone's concern. Millis accepted, and upon arrival, Carol greeted them joyfully, embracing Millis tightly. Lila gently comforted Kem, who wept softly in her arms, her whispers a soothing balm for Kem's quiet tears. Rhodas thanked everyone for their hard work and promised to treat them to a delicious dinner. Layla assured Malice that he was welcome to stay with her for as long as he needed. Yoshio watched, unable to hold back tears, deeply moved by everyone's determination and effort. He wondered what Melissa would do next, hoping he too could find a way to become as strong and dedicated. He knew without a doubt that today he would stand by his friend. Whatever choice Melissa made, Yoshio's only wish was for her wounds to heal swiftly and completely. In the next scene, Mollis stood poised atop a towering cliff, her silhouette outlined against the vast expanse below. And then, without warning, she leapt down. Yoshio jolted awake, his heart pounding as he realized it had all just been a terrifying nightmare. Gripped by anxiety, he rushed to his computer, desperate to check if Mollis was safe. As the image finally flickered onto the screen, he saw Mollis sitting silently at the table. Not a word escaped her lips. She seemed lost in thought, enveloped by a quiet tension. A wave of dread washed over Yoshio. He instinctively sensed that something was terribly wrong. Over breakfast, Carol remarked that she hadn't seen Mal Biss leave his room and wondered aloud if he wasn't feeling hungry. Rhodes reassured her with a gentle smile, explaining that Mal Biss simply needed a little more time to recover. As he pondered ways to lift the villagers' spirits, Yoshio's eyes landed on something intriguing, a brand new egg gacha machine, shimmering with promise and surprise. It could be used for free once a month, each time hatching a random creature, sometimes a lizard, bizarre being, or rare monster, that instantly became fiercely loyal to the first person it saw. Thoughts raced through Yoshio's mind. If it was a bird, they'd have fresh eggs. A reptile, they could grill it, or keep it as a pet. If a monster hatched, they'd gain a powerful ally in battle. Since it was free, he pressed the button. A plain egg appeared on the screen, with a message saying it would be placed near the village, not given directly to villagers, which Yoshio found odd. At last, he found the elusive egg and decided to share it with the villagers by leaving a prophecy with a hint. Soon after, Carol arrived excitedly, showed the egg to everyone, and couldn't wait to cook something special with it, but soon she stopped the girl, saying the egg was a sacred gift from God and not to be eaten. Carol nodded, set the egg before the Destiny God statue, and offered a heartfelt prayer of gratitude. Carol didn't know devotees brought gifts here. When the eggs vanished, Layla and Shot hurried to the statue, flustered, and confessed their mistake, apologizing for accidentally sacrificing the egg to the deity. Yoshio stood there, stunned, wondering if by some incredible twist of fate, this very egg might end up in his hands by tomorrow. Yoshio grew anxious. A troubling thought crossed his mind. If this wasn't a chicken egg, could it even be safe to eat? His worry deepened as he began to wonder what sort of creature might have laid this mysterious egg. After scouring the internet for information on similar eggs, he discovered that this one closely resembled a reptile's egg. He also wondered for a moment if it might be the egg of some fearsome monster, though the very thought struck him as utterly ridiculous. He hoped the egg would be a lizard or snake, easy to keep as a pet, but worried how his family might react. When the package arrived, his mother noticed it, joked about meat or fruit, then teased him about impressing Sayuki with a reptile. Yoshio was shocked when his mother confessed that she and his father were once passionate about reptiles, and she had raised countless lizards in a room Yoshio had never entered, making the story a complete revelation to him. Realizing he needed to strengthen family ties, Yoshio planned to ask his mother for advice on caring for a lizard egg he'd received. During dinner, his family offered help, shared tips, and grew closer while marveling over the mysterious egg together. As the conversation continued, most of the words drifted past Yoshi, their meanings slipping away before he could grasp them. Meanwhile, his father asked Sayuki to prepare a feeder and waterer for the eggs. Together they set up a cozy little dwelling for him and felt a surge of satisfaction at their handiwork. They told him the creature's identity would be revealed only after hatching and asked Yoshio to photograph the moment. Grateful, Yoshio thanked them, relieved to have two true reptile enthusiasts in his family. He also realized that, by some stroke of good fortune, his bond with his family grew stronger with each passing day, all thanks to the village of Vera. This experience deepened his conviction in the true existence of the god of faith, filling him with newfound certainty. A few days later, Yoshio showed up in unusually different clothes, which his mother immediately noticed. She teased him about going on a date, but he brushed it off and left to meet Saka, who apologized for being late. He asked how her leg was doing, and the girl reassured him that she felt perfectly fine now. Together, they stepped into a cafe, and Yoshio immediately noticed that the place was exactly the kind he had imagined. This didn't seem like a place to visit alone. When the dishes arrived, she eagerly declared she could eat them forever. Seeing her delight, Yoshio smiled. At moments like this, she was just as she'd been at 20. During their conversation, she recalled his mother's cooking, then asked about Yoshio. Saying his mother had mentioned his online rural revival project, she eagerly inquired which village it was, and Yoshio confirmed everything was true. Yoshio hesitated, torn between hiding the truth about the village of fate to keep playing and fearing she'd be disappointed if she learned how much he'd spent on microtransactions. After a brief pause, she repeated the question, her voice colored with a hint of curiosity. At last, he smiled and noted that this tiny village, home to just a few residents, was remarkable for its unity and kindness. Each villager worked tirelessly at their trade for the prosperity of their close-knit community. They toiled relentlessly, undeterred even by the harshest conditions. Observing their lives, he felt a growing desire within himself to become a better person. He explained what prompted him to embark on a new job and shared a few fascinating details about the village. She smiled mischievously and asked if he enjoyed the villagers' company. Yoshihiko eagerly shared lively stories, lifting her spirits. Walking home, they exchanged thanks. She refused his offer to pay, and he promised to treat next time. She then asked if he'd like to meet again, and he gladly agreed. She smiled warmly and suggested they meet again sometime. With those words lingering in the air, the two parted ways, each heading back to their own home. Wondering if an insect lurked nearby, he grabbed a rolled-up poster and scanned the room. Suddenly, a cracking sound drew his attention. The egg was hatching sooner than expected. Excitement grew as the shell slowly fractured. Tension mounted within him as he anxiously wondered what would emerge from the cracked shell. Yoshio frantically searched for Sayuki's notes. His nerves stretched taut as he ransacked every corner, but no matter how desperately he looked, they were nowhere to be found. Suddenly, a tiny lizard hatched from the egg. When he saw the charming lizard, Yoshihiro smiled warmly, took a photo to send to Sayuki and his father, and searched online for its species, wondering if its golden color meant it was newly hatched. His mother then called his name. He took his seat at the table, and Sayuki, her head bowed in quiet sorrow, asked if he had checked his phone. Offering a sheepish smile, he apologized, admitting he simply hadn't looked at it. Returning to his room, he was startled by a lizard on the floor. How had it escaped? He scooped it up to show the family, who, after dinner, admired its golden glow. Sayuki took a photo. Yoshio speculated it might be an armored lizard. Sayuki asked Yoshio if the villagers told him what the lizard ate. He said it fed on local fruit but avoided details about its species, insisted on secrecy, warned the diet may change, and afterward, everyone went to their rooms. Now they would likely drop by more often, curious to check on how the lizard was doing. Determined to protect his privacy, he made a habit of switching off the monitor whenever he left the room. Glancing back toward the village, he noticed that Carol was already fast asleep. While Layla and Rhodus engaged in a tense discussion about Mollis, Kem quietly approached Gams with a heartfelt request. She wished for permission to pray once more for the children of Mollis village. Gams reassured her that as soon as Mollis recovered, they would go together to pray. After that, he peeked into Mollis's room and saw him calmly engrossed in an intriguing book. It resembles the very Bible that Ham once used. As Mullah gazed at the book, he wondered why his god had abandoned him while the foreigners didn't. Yoshio also saw its similarity to Hem's Bible, full of divine commandments beloved and followed by Mullah's people. Since the Bible was meant to be read by people like him, Mollis believed he was entitled to God's grace. So, whenever blessings failed to come his way, he would start reproaching the gods, questioning their favor. Suddenly, Yoshio was struck by a troubling thought. If the village were attacked while he was away at work and he couldn't come to their aid, the villagers might begin to lose faith in him. He paused, pondering whether he should become the person he once was. Yet, the thought of returning to his former life filled him with nothing but reluctance. Instead, he dreamed of a more convenient, user-friendly help system. Just then, a new update caught his eye, the much-anticipated communication feature. He noticed to his delight that this feature was now available on his own phone as well. He wasted no time, downloading the app in a flash and launching it the very next moment. He was struck by the realization that he now wielded the power to perform miracles and glimpse into the future. This discovery delighted him. He could now watch the villagers during work breaks. The next day, Yoshio saw the lizard eating and, since his father and Sayuki were out, wondered if his mother had fed their scaly guest. He sat at his computer, keen to catch up on village news. On screen, people were joyful, laughter filled the air, and amid the celebration, Melissa Bird offered everyone a heartfelt apology for any trouble she caused. He asked if he, too, could stay in the village. He confessed that he had thought about leaving the forest, hoping to find any of his companions still alive, yet he had no idea what the world beyond the trees had become. The village became his only refuge, where he could build a life. Bowing, he asked to join them. Hams accepted him warmly, and the villagers greeted Mollis with open hearts as Yoshio watched, his happiness shining through. He exclaimed with pride that no one could compare to the people of his village. They truly were the very best. He noticed a notification pop up. Mollis has settled in the village. Now he finally had access to Mollis's background information. The young man discovered that Mollis was indeed 151 years old, and he was struck by how Mollis, though 151, looked as young as 20, an elven trait. She shook hands with Gams, still hiding her gender, which let Cam feel at ease on hunts. Yoshio felt happily welcomed her to Hope. As she stepped off the bus, a chilling sensation crept over her. Someone might be watching. Heart pounding, she darted into the nearest shop to seek safety. Fear trembled in her voice, prompting him to gently urge her to calm down. He informed her that he was already on his way and sternly ordered her not to leave the shop. Yoshio dashed out of the room in a hurry, while his lizard watched his every move with sharp, unblinking eyes. He pumped the pedals of his bicycle with all his might, racing full speed toward the store. But first and foremost, he fixed his mind on reaching Sayuki as quickly as possible. He burst into the shop at full speed, breathless and anxious, immediately asking if she was all right. Sayuki assured him she was fine, yet he couldn't help but notice the lingering tremble in her hands. He told her to stay while he confronted their pursuer, but Sayuki stopped him to describe the person she'd seen. 10 minutes later, he returned, having found no one. Sayuki apologized, fearing she was mistaken and doubting herself. Tayoshi soothed her gently, assuring her that everything was all right. He suggested that her current state might be the after effect of the frightening ordeal she had recently endured. The next day, as Yoshio was heading home from work, he received a message from Sayuki. Her father would be coming by to pick her up. Hearing this, a wave of relief washed over him. From that day forward, either he or their father made sure to meet Sayuki at the bus stop without fail. On his way home, Yoshio played Village of Fate and saw Mollis invite everyone to her ruined village, explaining that useful supplies remained and it was right to use them. The group discussed, and Carol eagerly agreed, citing her usual confinement at home. Carol glared indignantly at Shem, protesting it was unfair he could go when he wasn't helpful. Hem comforted her and promised she'd come, but Shem warned it was dangerous. Hem reassured him, and Shem agreed if Carol obeyed Hem completely. She agreed. Chen still hesitated, her uncertainty clear. Sensing this, Jem reassured her that Rhodus and Lila would join too, explaining everyone needed a reset or relentless stress could overwhelm them and drag them into despair. A breath of fresh air would do them all good. Yoshio watched with quiet satisfaction as Gam naturally assumed the role of protector to the villagers. Meanwhile, the young girl eagerly suggested they set out on horseback for the journey ahead. They hired a cart to easily transport goods home, pleasing everyone, especially Yoshio, who expected a more productive trip. As they prepared, Yamano noticed Yoshio playing a new game and, sensing Yamano's concern, asked if something was wrong. Yamano reminded him of a game he used to be utterly absorbed in, prompting Yoshio to immediately recall it. He asked if it was that same unusual strategy game where the goal was to conquer the opponent's territories. Yamaha confirmed that the enemy had seized control of one of his outposts. Yamaha said he'd invested heavily to strengthen his army, but it was all in vain. He only had a few bases left and had lost half his salary. Yoshio sympathized, admitting he too had spent thousands on his favorite game's microtransactions. Upon returning home, Yoshio immediately checked on the status of his village in the game. He found the villagers bustling about, preparing to set off on their journey astride their trusty horses. You notice a river flowing not far from the cave, yet the locals have chosen a longer route to deliberately avoid crossing it. Yoshio watched the map closely, intent on noticing any changes. With Mollis part of the village, her locations were clearly marked, but the dense, forbidden forest still hid its shadowy depths beyond his view. Lost in thought, he wondered how vast the map was. As they traveled, Carol teased Gams for looking like a knight escorting a princess. Gams smiled, calling her princess and checking her comfort, while Cham watched, feeling a pang of envy. They were nearly at the village when Yoshio noticed a small crowd had already gathered there. Though they seemed peaceful enough, Yoshio couldn't make out their faces. Yoshio couldn't understand their conversation without context or the Bible. Realizing their words were incomprehensible without it, he suspected that advancing in this mysterious game depended on the book. Since he couldn't perform miracles or deliver prophecies without the book, he hesitated to warn the villagers, choosing to keep the prophecy secret in case something worse happened that required his reserved power. When the villagers returned to their homeland, they were greeted by a scene of utter devastation. Everything around them lay in ruins and ruinous desolation. Suddenly, Gams halted the group and ordered everyone to stay put while he went ahead to inspect the house. He alerted everyone that there were people up ahead. Instantly, Mollison and Gums surged forward, pushing ahead at a swift pace. Malison held her bow taut, tension shimmering through her arms as she wondered what brought these villagers to her homeland. Suddenly, she recognized one of the men. Lowering her voice, she called out to him cautiously. Mollis nodded in agreement, and together they bowed their heads in silent prayer. Yoshio watched with a full heart as everyone gathered in prayer around the graves. Relief washed over him when he saw the villagers returning home unharmed, and he let out a quiet, grateful sigh. He went to the kitchen for meat and fruit, but when he returned, the lizard was missing from the terrarium. Scanning the room, he saw it atop the table, astonished. How had it escaped its enclosure? Then he offered her a succulent piece of meat. Meanwhile, Doldold couldn't help but notice the villagers. Each was gifted with a remarkable, unique talent. Watching them, he couldn't hide his admiration. They truly were an extraordinary people. After counting the money, Rhodas couldn't help but notice. The total seemed suspiciously high. Doldold explained that he had contributed extra money, fully aware that these people were under the divine protection of the God of Faith. He was certain this would benefit them both. Yoshio found himself admiring the merchant's generosity. It resonated with him deeply. Then Rhodas raised the question of whether anyone present might be willing to move to the village of Doldolda, since the community there was in desperate need of more residents. Doldold shared that in recent years, countless villages had been reduced to ruins by rampaging monsters. Together with his fellow tribesmen, he wandered in search of a peaceful place to call home. The villagers were stunned by the sudden appearance of this program, while Yoshio wondered whether the game would truly end if they left the forbidden forest. He withheld the prophecy to let them choose freely. Rhodas broke the silence, deciding to stay in the forest because his heart wished to remain under the God of Fate's protection. Layla and Mollis fully supported his choice to stay. Everyone agreed to stay together in the forest, pleasing Yoshio since the decision suited all. Doldal added he knew others driven from their homes who'd welcome this place and hoped everything would work out for everyone. Shaking hands in farewell, Doldold promised he'd return within a few days, bringing everything they had requested. After bidding farewell, Doldold set off on his journey, while everyone watched him go, their eyes and heartfelt words following him. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Yoshio felt compelled to share a prophecy with the villagers before he left. Kem read the prophecy. Mollis would always be welcome, and each farewell or new meeting would strengthen them. This made the villagers joyful and Yoshio satisfied, though he soon wondered if Lizard Soros suited his pet lizard. But the lizard shook its head in firm refusal. Yoshio suggested the name Destiny, explaining that in English it meant fate. Upon hearing this, the lizard nodded approvingly, and Yoshio happily bestowed upon her the name Destiny. Lounging in his chair, Yoshio messaged Sokka a photo of Carol's carved figurine. Sokka's admiration brought Yoshio back to 10 years earlier, when Sokka landed a top job and he was still finding his own path. Wounded and humiliated, he broke off all contact with her and refused to speak to her ever again. Frustration and embarrassment gnawed at him, and now he found himself tormented by guilt as well. A relentless question plagued his mind. Does someone like him even deserve a second chance to speak with her? For him, envisioning conversations with anyone outside his own family had always been a challenge. Yoshi noticed that while Gams was quietly working at his computer, he was surprisingly good with people. As Carol asked Gams about his hunting plans with Mollis, Yoshi saw she showed the same jealousy toward Mollis as Shem did, amusing him. Gams gently stroked her hair, promising to return soon. Yoshio envied such confidence, doubting he'd ever master it. Looking at Rhodos with his family, Yoshio thought he must always act as a responsible, grown-up man. Brodus and Layla made a shopping list for Doldal. Brodus felt grateful to avoid trips to town, while Layla saw it as a sign from God not to overburden themselves. Still, Brodus felt uneasy and useless, seeing young Gams work so hard. Yoshio sensed Rhodus's true worry was Carol falling under Gam's influence, as Layla suggested it might already be too late, and wondered if it mattered. Feeling helpless, Yoshio almost sought advice, but was quickly distracted by something else. Realizing he hadn't delivered a prophecy yet, he sought guidance from the villagers by sending a message explaining that one of his young followers was struggling in love and needed advice on relationships. The villagers stared at the message in disbelief, unsure if their god wanted to discuss love. Yoshio grew anxious, fearing he'd acted inappropriately, but Carol suggested the god had opened up to such questions. Cham objected, while Layla urged respect. She called it the perfect chance to repay his support. Most admitted little experience with romance. Layla had Chem clarify. A man and his childhood friend's relationship grew deeper, but they hesitated to call it love. Carol eagerly urged him to ask her out, surprising Yoshio, who wondered if it was too soon. Hem agreed, suggesting they enjoy themselves before getting serious, as shared experiences foster closeness. Layla added she and Rhodus dated before marriage, making Rhodus blush and plead for her not to mention it. After talking with the villagers, Yoshio felt inspired and, gathering courage, invited her to meet up. She replied she was busy with work, but suggested he try again. Disappointed, Yoshio realized his inexperience and felt a wave of sadness. However, he realized she hadn't actually refused his invitation outright. He decided to send the women yet another prophecy, expressing his gratitude and heartfelt thanks for their support. His message filled them with joy, and they eagerly responded to his sincerity. As Oshio recalled how his mother and Sayuki enjoyed TV dramas, he noticed similar unfiltered joy in the villagers, whose excitement at new events was infectious, inspiring him to sometimes share glimpses of his own life, despite some shyness. He resolved to share the outcome with them, whether it turned out to be a victory or a failure. With that decision made, he dialed Seika's number, eager to find out if she was available. She noted his calls were rare, but was free now. Curious, he asked her next day off. The next day, Yoshio shared his prophecy with the villagers, thanked them for their advice, and announced the issue was resolved, feeling a bit wistful. Yoshio dreamed of a thriving, safe village where his prophecies not only soothed worries, but also brought joy. Inspired, he left to find work, hoping to support his village and save for a long-awaited romantic outing. With unwavering resolve, he strode out of his room, ready to take action. After his shift, Yoshi came home and checked his phone. Sayuki had messaged that she'd be working late and asked if he could meet her at the bus stop when she finally returned much later than usual. With a reassuring smile, he promised the girl they would definitely meet again. Then, his thoughts drifted. Perhaps he should buy himself something sweet and some juice from the store. Lost in this idea, he began searching for his backpack. After searching, he found his backpack as Destiny, his lizard, watched intently. Yoshio headed to the shop, where a boy standing out from the busy crowd quickly caught his attention. A sudden thought struck him. Could this be the very same person who once hunted Sayuki? Memories from long ago rose unbidden in his mind, and he paused in contemplation. Could it truly be the very same person? All the more unsettling was that this was the boy's hometown. Yoshio, uneasy, watched him calmly sip coffee and scroll his phone, torn by doubts and unsure if seeing him before Sayuki's return was mere coincidence or a warning. Yoshio no longer wished for her to feel even a trace of fear, so, mustering his courage, Yoshio decided to approach the boy himself and try to settle the matter. As he drew nearer, he noticed two more people standing close by. He hesitated, debating whether to approach, knowing it would attract their attention. Summoning courage, he asked the boy if he was Yoshinaga. The boy nodded, glanced curiously, and quickly asked if he was Sayuki's older brother. Yoshinaga smiled warmly, nodding in agreement. Then, bowing deeply, he earnestly apologized for all the trouble he had caused them in the past. Yoshihori reassured him that the worst was over and, with a faint smile, admitted that perhaps he had been too harsh back then. He told Yoshinaga to look up. Though tempted to speak his mind, concern for Sayuki came first. He questioned Yoshinaga, who said he visited the only 24-hour store after work. To outsiders, he himself might seem more suspicious. Which, in the end, was the very cause of all this trouble. Suddenly, Yoshio found himself lost in thought. Why did he continue to pursue her, even after the court had forbidden it? Realizing this was the second time he'd seen him, Yoshio recalled how, on that night, Yoshinaga had bolted the instant their eyes met, vanishing into the darkness without a word. Although it was nothing more than a bluff, Yoshinaga fell for it. Annoyed, he demanded to know if his secret had been exposed. Frustrated, Yoshinaga snapped, yelling he'd ended up like Yoshio, his world in chaos, and blamed Yoshio and Sayuki for ruining his life. Yoshio retorted, warning him to stay away from his sister, and vowed to act if this continued. Yoshinaga smirked with disdain, mocking Yoshio by asking if he planned to call the police. With a boastful tone, he added that he had plenty of friends from reform school. Yoshio asked why he had stalked Sayuki. Yoshinaga admitted he truly loved her but lacked the courage to talk to her. After his arrest, reflection led his feelings to spiral into a relentless, aggressive obsession. In that instant, Yoshida realized that all he truly wanted was to see Sayuki break down in tears, to force her to beg him for mercy. Hearing this confession, Yoshio hesitated, torn between staying put or fleeing the scene altogether. Yoshio clenched his fist, vowing never to regret again. Determined not to back down, even at great cost, he would sacrifice everything to stop this man. Fueled by righteous fury, he strode resolutely toward Yoshinaga. Yoshinaga sneered, taunting Yoshio wouldn't hit back since it'd count as an attack, but Yoshio was quietly recording on his phone. Realizing this, Yoshinaga insulted him and said he'd target Sayuki's brother too. Yoshio, unsettled by Yoshinaga's words, suddenly realized that an even larger crowd had gathered around him. He also noticed a camera quietly recording every moment as events unfolded. With a smug grin, Yoshinaga announced that they would broadcast everything live, declaring it perfect material for stellar content. Yoshinaga realized he was in the minority, but instead of faltering, he stood his ground with unwavering composure. Yoshio remembered when the villagers fought monsters. Now, he faced ordinary men instead. Still, he refused to back down. One man eyed Yoshio, taking note of his strong, well-built frame, but Yoshio stood his ground. Yoshio mused that at the very least his steadfast training had sculpted his physique into something impressive. His body radiated strength and resilience, leaving a striking impression. He shouted harshly at Yoshinaga, warning him that any mischief would not go unpunished. But Yoshinaga only smirked with contempt, replying that he didn't care. After all, his friends kept dangerous company, and they always had his back. As Yoshio saw his 5 armed assailants close in, their ringleader threatened to break his legs. Suddenly, all 5 began coughing violently and collapsed unconscious, struck down by a mysterious affliction before they could attack. Stunned, Yoshinaga exclaims in disbelief at what Yoshio has done. Equally shaken, Yoshio retorts that if he doesn't want them to die, he needs to rush them to the hospital right away. But before Yoshinaga can utter a single word, he too suddenly collapsed, losing consciousness in an instant. Witnessing everyone in such a dire condition, Yoshio steps forward to examine them with concern. To make sure this isn't just an act, Yoshio carefully observes the scene, convinced that what's unfolding is disturbingly real and far from ordinary. Panic overtook him, and he dashed to the nearest 24-hour convenience store. He quickly told the shopkeepers to call the police and an ambulance, explaining that 5 men had collapsed on the street. When Sayuki reached the bus stop, she saw an ambulance already parked nearby. She spotted her brother Yoshio being questioned by a police officer. The officer asked Yoshio if he'd gone to the store for help. Yoshio nodded. Asked about his connection to the group, Yoshio hesitated, calling it complicated. As the officer searched his things, Sayuki approached, concerned. Yoshio explained that a man had lost consciousness, likely from food poisoning, and reassured her he'd called her father to pick her up. Sayuki asked if he was skipping work and said they'd grown worried and picked him up. She apologized, looking truly sorry, but he said it was fine. His father suggested going home, noting the police station wasn't ideal for talking. When they got in the car, Yoshia hesitated, then confessed. The boy was Yoshinaga, Sayuki's persistent stalker. Shocked, Sayuki cried out, but her father calmly urged her to compose herself and told Yoshia they'd talk privately later. A wave of sadness washed over Yoshio as he heard his father's voice, instantly sensing the disappointment behind his words. Yet Yoshio couldn't help but wonder what might have happened to him, and why his father had asked, "Keep this to yourself." If only the boys hadn't fainted. Yoshio sank deep into thought. His father's words echoed in his mind, assuring him that he was proud and that Ezio had done everything he could to protect his sister. Hearing this, Yoshiotu was surprised. His father, a firm skeptic and die-hard atheist, had jokingly admitted that so many people getting food poisoning at once seemed almost miraculous. At first, Yoshio thought it was just food poisoning from spoiled oysters, but the victim's severe itching and suffocating breathlessness seemed more like gas poisoning than typical shellfish illness. It was something that affected them deeply, yet left him untouched. At long last they arrived home, where his mother, her worry evident in her eyes, immediately rushed over and anxiously asked if he was all right. Yoshiori gently reassured his mother that all was well, then went to his room, where his beloved lizard Destiny was already waiting, lounging in its usual spot. He paused, wondering if Destiny had taken notice of what had happened to those boys. He quickly dismissed the idea as impossible. Weary, he sat at his computer in a fresh shirt, catching up on village news and watching the hard-working, determined villagers continue their tireless efforts. Smiling quietly, he felt deep gratitude, for their support gave him strength to protect his sister. Exhausted as dawn broke, Yoshio wisely decided to rest, settled into bed, and quickly fell asleep. At noon, Yoshio was roused from sleep by the sound of his mother's voice calling out to him. Yoshio's mother asked if he was awake. Expecting a delivery as he went downstairs, she instead said they had a guest and refreshments ready. To his amazement, Yoshio found Seika and Sayuki waiting in the reception room. Surprised, he wondered why Seika wasn't at work. She, visibly worried, said Sayuki had told her everything, so she took the day off. Yoshihiko joined them, comforted them, and, after cherishing the moment, asked what Seika knew. "Everything," she replied. She described how the boys plotted to kidnap her before Yoshio saved her. Sensing his worry, Sayuki asked what was wrong. Yoshio assured her, but said the boys were hospitalized and likely to be arrested due to incriminating messages. Upon hearing this, Sayuki sighed in relief and admitted she felt lighter. Yoshio gently urged her to seek him if it happened again. Blushing, she thanked him, calling him Big Brother. Seika teased them, and both happily agreed their bond was clear. Seika asked Yoshio if they could be friends again, surprising him and prompting an apology for avoiding her years ago. She forgave him instantly, assuring him she never hated him. Her absences were only due to unavoidable work assignments. She was about to speak but fell silent, feeling it was inappropriate with Sayuki there. Spotting a lizard behind Yoshio, she cried out in fright. Yoshio, seeing this, considered it fate at work and became deeply thoughtful. Yoshio couldn't understand how the cat escaped again, but curious Yuki eagerly offered to hold it, so he handed it to her, while Saka, visibly uneasy, asked them to keep the cat at a safe distance from her. Suddenly she realized that ever since childhood she had harbored an aversion to reptiles and amphibians. Yoshio T tried to play a prank, holding the lizard up to her as if he were about to bring it even closer. She cried out, sternly told Yoshio to stop acting childish, reminding him how it annoyed her. Sayuki burst out laughing. Yoshio gave an embarrassed grin and apologized, while Yama sulked over his base's sudden defeat in his game. He couldn't shake the thought of all the hours and money he'd poured into the game, and that only fueled his frustration even more. Muttering angrily under his breath, he tapped the phone's screen. "Yoshio," he growled. In the next scene, he greeted everyone with weary resignation and announced that he brought everything they had requested, and with him came newcomers intrigued by the prospect of making this place their home. The band members received an invitation to join the competition. At first, uncertainty clouded their faces as they wondered how others might react. To their amazement, however, they were met with genuine warmth and heartfelt hospitality. Doldold revealed Khan and Ron's impressive wood, stone, and metalworking skills, learned from dwarves in the caves. Yoshio saw their talents benefiting the village, and their presence alone inspired calm and confidence in everyone. Within a few days, every corner of the village caves was filled to capacity, leaving no space untouched. The defensive perimeter had been widened, stretching further than before. Cannon and Ran built a small hut and, with the mice and Gaimes, are now constructing a food storage facility. Yoshio noticed they're highly skilled with spears and often spar, training their combat skills with great dedication. Yoshi watched Malice and the girls gather herbs under the forest light. He kept the villagers' medicine as a good luck charm, touched by their efforts. Hoping to soon summon another golem, he awaited month's end. Next day, after their shift, the foreman announced they'd move sites after lunch and rest briefly in the minibus before evening work. Even just hearing about it was exhausting. As the year drew to a close, orders poured in, and on some days, the work would start early in the morning. The work stretched on until 4 in the morning. Exhaustion gnawed at him, every muscle pleading for rest, yet he refused to surrender. Even as the temptation to skip his shift grew almost unbearable, his determination held firm. When Yoshio returned, his mother warmly asked if he'd join dinner. Too tired to eat, he said he was exhausted and just wanted to go to bed. As soon as he entered his room, he collapsed onto the bed, utterly spent, his thoughts drifting to those who toil diligently day after day and how arduous their lives must truly be. The world sorely lacks gratitude for people like them. Their tireless work is worthy of far greater recognition. He drifted into sleep almost instantly and awoke with the first light of morning. He still felt no urge to leave the comfort of his bed. Gazing at the village through the window of his screen, he caught sight of Carol offering him her favorite fruit, a gentle smile lighting up her face, and offering prayers for the safety of all, even as they faced the temptations unleashed by the malevolent god. The moment Yoshio caught sight of her, determination surged within him. As Yoshio settled in and refocused on work, a voice behind him accused someone of carelessness. He apologized, turned to see the supervisor, but realized it was Yama, not him, who was being reprimanded. There was a time when Yama was the life of the break, cracking jokes, chatting brightly with everyone around him. Now he loses himself in his video game, barely uttering a word to anyone. During break time, Yoshio immersed himself in his favorite game, playing with intense focus, completely absorbed in his own little world. Yoshi was absorbed in his phone game when Yama approached, noting Yoshi's focus. Yama described the game: destroy strongholds and recruit monsters if you can buy their loyalty. He always played the evil deity, delighting in destruction. He explained the game let players earn points by defeating enemies or buy them with real money, admitting he spent most of his earnings on bonuses. This made Yoshio suspect Doli Village might have an evil god role and other players. Meanwhile, Yama eagerly boasted about his game, proudly listing impressive rewards and explaining that destroying enemy bases earned him points, which could later be exchanged for real cash. He admitted that once he had made 5 million yen this way, which left Yoshio stunned. Yamavanan explained he used the entire sum to pay off his father's debts before disappearing without a trace. Yama dropped out of school and took tough jobs to reduce his family's debts, losing his youth to obligations. Still, he gratefully shared how gaming unexpectedly let him earn money, helping him pay off most of what he owed. Yet Yoshio was bewildered, not understanding why Yama confided in him. Yama met his gaze and continued. The same two-sworded swordsman who scarred his face, and he hoped Yoshio would grasp the rest. At that moment, Yoshio realized Yama was referring to Gams. Like a lightning bolt, it hit him. Yama was the evil god from Fate's village. Suddenly, it was clear. They'd all unknowingly been opposing none other than... It turned out that, All along, they had been unknowingly pitted against each other in a silent struggle. Now everything was clear. If either of them lost, the game would end forever. For both. Ziyama turned on his heel and strode away, while Yoshio, unable to help himself, paused, lost in thought. Perhaps Yamaha shared this story with a hidden purpose, to gently suggest that it was time for him to bow out of the game. He also realized that, for Yama, this game might have been a beacon of hope during difficult times. In truth, it was no different for him. This game offered him solace just as much. Ever since he first immersed himself in Village of Fate, his entire life had undergone a profound transformation. As both his career and personal life flourished, Yoshio formed deep bonds with true friends among the villagers, realizing how much the game had changed his world and vowing to protect his cherished virtual companions. He resolved to oppose the Siamese despite obstacles. On December 30th, the leader thanked Yoshio for his dedication, expressing hope for future collaboration. Warm wishes were shared by all, except one person. Only Yama remained silent. When Yoshio was dropped off, he hoped they'd eventually understand each other, but he was struck by the fear that the next day he'd face the evil god's temptation, and, despite his wishes, couldn't avoid clashing with Yama. Suddenly a voice greeted him, welcoming him back. Startled, he made his way to the kitchen, only to find Seika busily preparing a meal. With a cheerful smile, Seika announced dinner would be ready soon. The boy, surprised by her presence, learned his mother asked Seika to watch him. She asked if he was hungry, and grinning, he admitted he was absolutely starving. In silent gratitude, he thanked his mother, remembering how she had always come to his aid whenever he needed her most. Yoshio was surprised, never having considered it. Seeing this, she offered him a ride the next day. Grateful but not wanting to impose, he accepted if it wasn't a bother. She smiled and assured him she had plenty of free time. They asked us if we could all share soba together to celebrate the new year. He agreed, though nagged by uncertainty. Was it right to enjoy a hearty dinner with the evil god's temptation near? On December 31st, he sat at his computer, glancing up at an anxious, worry-etched face. Concerned for his villagers' safety, he pleaded with fate about surviving the coming disaster. Around 1 p.m., Mollis urgently warned 5 shadowy hounds and 5 wild boars were charging toward the village. Yoshio's attention was caught by a sudden notification. The temptation of the evil god had begun. The monsters surged toward the village with alarming speed. Mollis drew his bow taut and let an arrow fly, striking one of the shadowy hounds dead on. The remaining monsters scattered in terror, wary of her deadly bow. This made defending the village far more difficult. Suddenly, several monsters stumbled into hidden traps and vanished from sight. Yoshio was swept up in a wave of excitement. His plan was unfolding perfectly. Just last week, during the prophecy, he had suggested setting these very traps. He noticed that the boars could only charge straight ahead, so one after another, the beasts tumbled into the pit, while the dogs leapt desperately, trying to clear the fence. One by one, the monsters tumbled into the pit, while the dogs desperately tried to leap over the fence in a frantic bid for escape. Realizing that the danger had now passed, in the past, when only Gams possessed the strength to stand and fight, Yoshio often felt weighed down by anxiety. But now, after overcoming the first onslaught of monsters alongside his companions, an immense sense of relief washed over him. Gams ordered everyone to reset the traps. While the others complied, Yoshio doubted the monsters would fall for them again, and wondered if Yama could directly command her monsters. Gazing out the window, he pondered how the coming night would only make the monsters more menacing. They needed to conserve their strength and rest as much as possible before darkness fell. Soon, a second wave of monsters surged forth, followed swiftly by a third, each even more menacing than the last. They successfully repelled the assault. Cham handed out water, Rotus took over guard duty, and Yoshio, pleased everything was going as planned, felt confident his remaining golem could protect them until Seika arrived that night. Yoshio paused, wondering what Yama might be up to at that very moment. He even considered calling him, but quickly remembered they were rivals now, locked in a fierce competition against each other. So Yama might easily conclude that he was deliberately trying to provoke him. More than an hour had slipped by without a single new attack, and Yoshio couldn't help but wonder if anything else would happen at all. He had the feeling that the attackers had finally withdrawn, and that realization left him disappointed. For Yamamoto, he had expected far more. Suddenly, he sensed someone's presence on the first floor. Suspecting it might be Seka, he hurried to the kitchen, his heart brimming with anticipation. He saw no one in sight, but suddenly, Yoshio was just about to call the police when, all of a sudden, he caught sight of the robber's distinctive hairstyle, and to his astonishment, realized it was actually Yamamoto. Several months ago, Yama received a letter that left him deep in thought as he wondered what words it might contain. As Yamamoto read the letter, he realized it was about a game called Destruction Impulse, and that he himself had been selected to be a beta tester. Moto paused, unsure if he'd signed up to test the game. After scanning the code, the stunning graphics amazed him, but he soon lost interest due to lack of control over summoned monsters. Then the house owner called his name outside. Yama opened the door and politely asked the man to calm down. However, his visitor grew more insistent, demanding to know when Yama would finally pay the rent and settle his outstanding debt. Yama asked to pay by phone. The man agreed, and Yama instantly paid all his debts. Curious about the sudden money, the man asked its source, but Yama dismissed it and promised never to be late with rent again. The man walked away, and Yama couldn't help but smile to himself, silently acknowledging that this game was indeed bringing him real money. At first, he barely paid any attention to the game, but once he discovered that the points earned from evaluating minor enemy bases could be exchanged for real money, he found himself coming back to it more and more often. His dream had come true. He could now earn money by playing a game. Overjoyed, he saw a way out of debt. Meanwhile, while still working at the shop, his boss mentioned a new employee named Yoshio. When Yama cast his eyes on Yoshio, he couldn't help but notice the man's impressive physique. Yet, despite his strong build, Yoshio's face appeared pale and drawn, as if exhaustion had drained all the color from his features. At first glance, Yamata Yoshio seemed unwavering in his resolve. But when it came to the actual work, at first, it looked like he might quit any time, but Yoshio soon tackled his work with impressive energy, excelling in every task. Yamaha was very pleased. He had finally found an exceptional subordinate. That evening at home, Yama was engrossed in a video game, battling the final villain, a sinister god of temptation, where all his strongest monsters were defeated by a relentless wooden golem. He stood stunned by her formidable strength, instantly regretting that he hadn't brought the red Cyclops along. The next day, Yama learned Yoshia also loved video games, giving him hope they could be friends. But that evening, Yama found his base destroyed, his Cyclops dead, and swordsmen present. He instantly knew who was behind the attack. A surge of fury swept over Yamu as the truth dawned on him. This was Yoshio's answer, a brutal response to the recent attack on his cave. Ever since they walked home together, Yoshio was absorbed in a mobile game, which Yama realized was the same one where his aunt's attacker appeared, except Yoshio played on the rival team. Seething, Yama vowed to confront and defeat him. Suddenly his monsters fell into a cunning trap, and a storm of fury erupted within him as he witnessed the formidable power of Yoshio base. He realized the defenses were now much stronger and regretted wasting hours on worry and cigarettes. The fear of never overcoming such cleverly engineered safeguards filled him with quiet frustration. He was itching to spend his money right away to strengthen his forces, but then he remembered that Ezio still had his secret trump card, the Wooden Man. Jammer paused, deep in thought, weighing his next move. A thought struck him. What if Yoshio couldn't play longer? He calmed himself. Doubt defied all he'd achieved. Yet deep down, certainty burned. Victory felt close, especially now as his monsters drew power from the falling night. He glanced at the empty cigarette pack and, craving some fresh air, decided to head to the store. But the moment he opened the door, a stranger appeared before him and unexpectedly asked, "Do you believe in God?" Yama curtly ordered him to leave, noting he was busy. Noticing the man didn't look religious, Yama watched as he grinned slyly and claimed to believe only in the dark gods, not those Yama expected. With a dismissive wave of his hand right in Yamaha's face, he left the man stunned and speechless. Now, in the present, Yoshio turned to the culprit and asked, had he? The villain ripped off his mask, finally revealing his true face to the world. He paused, curiosity flickering in his eyes as he wondered how the man had recognized him. Yoshio demanded to know why Yama was here and told him to drop the crowbar. Yama hinted Yoshio knew, denied ruining his game, and warned him not to interfere. Yoshio refused to quit, saying he couldn't, and condemned Yama's actions. Yama smirked, claiming he'd just tell police he visited a colleague's house after a wild party and found the crowbar by chance in Yoshio's shed. Yoshio scoffed, but Yamas mockingly asked if anyone would believe Yoshio's story instead. Yoshio felt a sharp sting from those words, suddenly realizing just how isolated his existence had been for the past 10 years. Meanwhile, Yama was tirelessly forging ahead, working hard and weaving connections with everyone around him. No one would believe Yoshio's story. Yamamoto confessed he didn't want to harm anyone or commit a crime, urging Yoshio to surrender, promising to split the prize, and making Yoshio reconsider, searching Yamamoto's eyes for truth. He felt guilty for killing villagers in the game, and wondered if Yamamoto ever hesitated. But Yamamoto said it always felt like just a game. Yoshio still wondered if these virtual villagers fought to survive like real people. In his eyes, these characters had become much more than mere fictional creations. When Yoshio gently asked if he might reconsider his decision, Yamaha simply lowered his head, his expression clouded with silent resignation. Believing Yoshio was acting foolishly, Yamaha explained he too had faced hardships, growing up in a broken home, dropping out of school and scraping by, then indignantly asked if Yoshio truly understood the value of money. Yama, barely masking his anger, demanded Yoshio consider how much his family had invested in him. The harsh words left Yoshio sorrowful, realizing he'd blamed fate for his misfortunes without appreciating what he'd been given. And at last he realized, until now he had been doing nothing but searching for excuses. Yammer, still furious, told Yoshio that as someone without a strong academic background, this game was his only chance. He insisted loudly that he knew how bleak life could get without getting into a good university. Hearing all of Yama's words, Yoshio was struck silent. No reply came to his lips. In that moment, a flood of memories swept before his eyes, as if his entire life flashed past in a single, vivid instant. He clenched his fists, struggling to hold back the torrent of tears streaming from his eyes. Yama, astonished, asked why Yoshio was crying, insisting he himself should be the one in tears. Yoshio, sobbing, called Yama extraordinary, but Yama couldn't shake the feeling that Yoshio was mocking him. Yoshio assured them he wasn't joking. With unusual candor, he admitted that, until now, he had never realized how fortunate he truly was, even though he'd wasted the last 10 years in apathy. He realized he had been a burden to many, and deeply regretted not finding the courage to change sooner. Yama burst out laughing, brushing off the comment as if it were nothing more than a flimsy attempt at pity. Grinning, he turned his phone toward Yoshio, revealing the screen. He declared that the final stage of the evil god's temptation had begun. Witnessing this breathtaking spectacle, the number of beasts creeping ever closer to the village grew relentlessly. Gams and the villagers stood frozen in shock, their eyes wide with disbelief at the astonishing scene before them. With a smug grin, Yama told Yoshio he had spent his last penny and sent in his entire army, knowing he had to destroy Yoshio's village or lose. As Yoshio reached for his phone, Yama menacingly warned him not to move, brandishing a crowbar. Yoshio frantically searched for help when Seika arrived, asking about unfamiliar voices. Panicked, Yoshio told her to stay away, but she entered, saw Yamamoto, mistook him for a burglar, and Yama immediately swung a crowbar at her. In a flash, Yoshio darted between them, positioning himself as a barrier before anyone else could react. Yoshio took the blow head-on and collapsed heavily onto the floor. Enraged, Yama hurled insults at him, calling him a fool and blaming him for all their misfortunes. Grimacing in pain, Yoshio cried out, desperately begging them not to run away. She promised she would go and summon reinforcements. Hearing this, Yama lunged forward, attempting to grab her, but Yoshio swiftly pulled him back by the leg. Yama grimaced, his lips curling into a sardonic smile. He suspected Yoshio only wanted to play the hero in her eyes. Burning with fury, Yama swings his crowbar with all his might, landing a powerful blow on Yoshio once more. She screams, her voice sharp with desperation, demanding that he stop interfering at once. Suddenly, Yama freezes, paralyzed by a piercing scream. His arms go numb in an instant, leaving him unable to move a muscle. Stunned and bewildered, he struggled to comprehend what was happening, until suddenly, he caught sight of a tiny yellow lizard right before his eyes. Suddenly, he realized that this very creature could be the root of all that had transpired. With a steely gaze, he commanded it to stay away, his voice leaving no room for defiance. But before he could act, Yama suddenly collapsed to the floor, drained of strength just like Yoshinaga and his friends had been moments earlier. Satsu rushed instantly to Yoshio's side, but suddenly, a lizard named Fate leapt onto her. Startled, she screamed, but as Fate crawled across her body, the girl fainted in terror. Yoshio, utterly paralyzed and stripped of the ability to speak, could do nothing but watch in silent desperation. All the while, Fate retrieved a potion crafted by Melissa and the moment Yoshio took a sip, the potion slipped right into his mouth. Suddenly, a surge of vibrant energy coursed through Yoshio, electrifying every fiber of his being. His wounds began to heal before my eyes, knitting together with astonishing speed. He rushed to Saki's side and, with a wave of relief, realized she was unharmed. She simply fainted. When he glanced at Yama, he saw the same distant look that Yoshinaga had worn earlier. In that instant, he knew with certainty everything that had unfolded was orchestrated by fate itself. Anxious, Yoshinaga grabbed his phone, heart racing, to check on his game's village. Seeing monsters approaching, Gam and Panic yelled for everyone to hide in the cave, and the group rushed inside, scrambling to decide their next move. The monsters had already begun to tear down the barricade. Hams warned that it was only a matter of time before they broke through and flooded inside. As doom loomed, Hem reminded all the god of fate still watched. Gams, guilty, admitted his failure to protect them. Carol, scared, drank Mollis's calming potion and slept as Layla wept, until Hem insisted a sacrifice might yet save a life. Chen believed that sacrificing Carol might bring even a faint hope of salvation, shocking everyone and raising doubts about its permissibility. With no other options, Jem urged action as Layla gently placed Carol before the god of fate's statue. She pleaded with the heavens for mercy and forgiveness, desperate for deliverance from their failure. Suddenly, a brilliant light filled the cave as the power to summon the golem erupted into life. Everyone froze in astonishment as a towering golem appeared before them, clutching Carol firmly in its massive hand. At last, Yoshio brought the golem to life. Everyone watched in awe as the giant lumbered toward the monsters. Seeing that the creatures had encircled the cave, Yoshio made up his mind to unleash the golem against them. Yoshio was prepared to spend every last fate point he had in order to seize victory. Without a moment's hesitation, he charged outside with the golem at his side. Cutting a swath through the horde of monsters, he ruthlessly annihilated every foe that dared cross his path. He urged everyone to follow the god of faith, pressing forward with unwavering confidence. Amidst the bustling crowd, he spotted 3 towering red cyclopes standing out like flames in the throng. He boldly resolved to take on the colossal monsters alone, determined to face them without anyone's help. He left the lesser monsters for his companions to handle. He suddenly found himself face to face with 3 towering cyclopes. He realized that taking on everyone at once would be a nearly impossible challenge. He darted around, kicking up thick clouds of dust, vanishing into the swirling haze. Shrouded behind a veil of smoke, he unleashed silent bursts of gunfire at his unsuspecting foes. Switching to long-range mode, his vision sharpened, allowing him to pick out his targets with newfound clarity. He launched his assault from a distance, striking out before his enemy could react. He managed to bring down one of the fearsome cyclopes. He deftly dodged the blows of the other 2 cyclopes, then struck back with a swift and merciless counterattack. With a single lightning-fast motion, he took down another adversary, rendering him powerless in an instant. Now only 2 remained in the arena. Without hesitation, they lunged at each other, and the Cyclops brandished his weapon, ready to block the oncoming assault. Dodging the blow with lightning reflexes, he struck back in an instant. He delivered a crushing blow straight to his opponent's face. Yoshio cried out with joy, his voice rising above the crowd as he celebrated the moment alongside everyone else. Together they overcame the swarm of lesser monsters. Together they erupted in jubilant shouts, their voices ringing with the sweet thrill of victory. Suddenly, Yoshio was startled by the shrill alarm on Yamaza's phone. Curious grabbed it and saw a chilling alert: defeat in the game, and worse, a message that all Yamaza's memories would be erased. Yoshio was utterly stunned. Nobody had even bothered to warn Yama about this. He could scarcely believe it. A troubling thought haunted him. Could it really be true that Yama would forget everything that had happened today? Despite lingering anxieties, Yoshio felt relieved. Yama wouldn't recall harming the villagers. Yet Yoshio wondered if Yama had gone mad from the game, as Yama awoke suddenly, confused, noting the late hour and asking his location. Bewildered, Yoshio asked if Yamaha had really forgotten. Instantly, he claimed they'd celebrated at his place, and Yamaha just dozed off. Yamaha agreed, recalling only a mysterious stranger possibly hypnotizing him that night. Yama, anxious and confused, tried to recall if he'd drunk at Yoshio's, and worried he'd caused trouble while intoxicated, offering to make amends, while Yoshio, struck by suspicion of manipulation, felt a chill run down his spine. Yoshio, still reeling in disbelief, couldn't fathom that anyone would go to such extreme lengths merely for the sake of a simple game. With a forced smile, he told Yami he already had New Year's Eve plans. Yami nodded, apologized, said he was heading home, and as they parted, Yoshio wished him a happy new year. Yoshihiro turned to Seika, wanting to make sure she was unharmed. As she slowly opened her eyes, her hand reached up to caress his face, her touch gentle and full of concern. In a soft whisper, she asked if he was hurt. Seike glanced around for the lizard, confused, but Yoshiro reassured her gently that he was fine and joked she was just tired from New Year's cleaning. She agreed it must have been a dream, unaware destiny hid in Yoshi's hair. Seika set about preparing their next dish, and together they enjoyed a peaceful New Year's celebration. In the weeks that followed, Yoshi noticed that Yamasa's behavior had returned to its usual self. He returned to his work with renewed diligence, no longer appearing possessed by that same feverish obsession. He was no longer tormented by the shadowy force that once held him captive. Meanwhile, the villagers had already rebuilt their homes and restored all the structures that had been destroyed. When the sinister god's temptation faded, peace returned to the village. Life resumed cheerfully as villagers basked in contentment. Carol, beaming, proudly displayed her latest creation, a figurine for the goddess of fate. Still, despite Cam's irritation, the village had come back to life and was thriving once more. The bustle and laughter of daily life returned, even as her annoyance simmered beneath the surface. Suddenly, Sayuki and her father arrived, eager to see the legendary lizard. Sayuki wanted to post its photo online, but Yoshio stopped her, explaining it was a rare village treasure. He wondered why his game now linked to Cell of Doli, and him. He also found himself pondering Yama's mention of another player, but this only deepened his confusion. The very next day, Saker arrived at his door, fully prepared and eager to set out on the journey together. With a grin, his mother teased Yoshio about a date, but Sakama said they were just getting sweets. His mother joked she wouldn't mind joining, but shouldn't intrude. Flustered, Yoshio insisted it wasn't a date, and they left together, Saka smiling.